Hi everyone, welcome to Coffs Harbour and Gumbaynggirr land. My name is Belinda and I will be your host today. I'd like to introduce the wonderful Uncle Richard for Welcome to Country.
Thank you, Belinda. Hope you can see me okay. Australia has 250 Aboriginal nations speaking some 500 dialects. The nation or the country that we're in here is the Gumbaynggirr nation. In our nation, for hello, we say Gimmigay. So I'd like to say Gimmigay Gagu Jinda Najawan. Noyam Richard, Noyam Bhagawa Jagan, Gumbaynggirr Waja. Noyam Galam Burla Guyujiwa. So hello, brothers and sisters, everybody. My name's Richard. I'm from the Bhagawa clan of the Gumbaynggirr Nation, and I'm here as a representative of the Coffs Harbour Aboriginal Elders Group to give you a welcome. Two things I'd like to do. Firstly, I would like to thank today's organisers, especially Belinda, for asking for a welcome to country. It's one of the most respectful ways to honour Aboriginal people and traditional custodians. And the second thing is to explain what a welcome to country is about, because quite often we hear it and we're not real sure what it's about. So the Gumbaynggirr Nation goes from Mount Yarrahapinni in the south, across the mountain line up to the Clarence River and to Red Rock. In that area, we've got 6 clan groups, and the clan group we're in here is Galam Burla, meaning Coffs Harbour, River Oak. On the other side of the Clarence River are the Bundjalung people. If the Bundjalung people or any other neighbours wanted to come into our country, they knew that they had to set up camp on their side of the river and wait. So there'd be a big tree up there, a bit like sitting on the veranda of your house. They'd set up camp under that tree and they would wait till one of our old people went over there. And eventually, somebody would get in a canoe, they go across the river, and they would say to them fellas, "Who are you? Where are you going? Who do you know? What's your business? How long are you going to be in our country?" A bit like going through customs. And people had to answer that. And if they answered it, then the door was open for people to come into our house, into our home. But we didn't just open the door and say, "You go and do whatever you want." My old fellas, they might take them to a special place like the place we call Sealy Lookout. Now, Gumbaynggirr, that's Nigi, place of plenty of coal. Might take you up there and they will show you the land of the Gumbaynggirr Nation and talk about specific places, special places. One of those might be Wunyangura, which we know as, in English, as Solitary Island with the lighthouses. I might talk to you about that place and how significant it is and how our old people used to walk out there to go fishing. And the midden that's actually out there, the significance and importance of that. With the hope and the belief that the respect that we have for that place, you'll have. We'll be able to share that with you. That's what a welcome to country is about. It's about sharing our respect. Now, with those 500 dialects, there was never a word for thank you, and there didn't need to be a thank you because it was about respect. But people would say, "When I'm in your country, I promise that I will tread softly, speak wisely, and I won't take anything that doesn't belong to me." That's that respect. That's what the welcome's about. So on that note, I would like to acknowledge that my old people have looked after and cared for this country for thousands of years, pay respects to my elders past and present, extend that respect to everybody here today. And on behalf of the Coffs Harbour Aboriginal Elders Group, I say to you, Dariya Yalami, welcome. Thank you.
Okay, just some housekeeping, mostly for the people here in the room. So we have an emergency exit just outside the door here. We occasionally have evacuations, but we won't today, it'll be fine. But just head down there. I'm a warden, so I can help out if need be. Toilets are on, hello, take a seat. Toilets are on the far side of the computers. So we're on level 2, main part of the library. Bank of computers just out here. If you just walk down this corridor, and the toilets are on the far side there. And let me know if you need anything at all. Just up the back, we've got tea and coffee. There's some Coffs collections notebooks there if you want to grab one. And we also have a little pile of Neil Yates Part 2, History of Coffs Harbour Part 2. You can take one if you like. Yeah. Anything else I've missed? Oh, and we have morning tea. We have a plate of brownies, gluten-free brownies coming from Happy Frog. They're delicious. They're a special request. So that will be at 10:30. Can I introduce? Yeah. I'd like to reintroduce Uncle Richard. He's just got comfy. To talk to us about the Will Rogers repatriation project. Sorry.
So, hello again. One of my other hats that I wear is on the Aboriginal Community Plan in the city of Coffs Harbour. Been here about 6 years. I want to talk to you about what we call the Will Rogers collection and the repatriation of those. So Will Rogers and his wife were amateur archaeologists. They lived here in Coffs Harbour in the 1960s and had the opportunity to save some of our artefacts. So that picture that you see on the screen, that's the place they call Moonee Beach. We call that Munyum Munyum. When we say a word, it's a double, it means place of plenty. And certainly Moonee was one of those. There was a stone etch factory there, and all of those rocks that you see in that, well, they're not rocks, they're actually artefacts that have been designed into rocks. All of those came from Moonee Moonee. Munyum Munyum. We go to our next slide. So what initially happened was council had a whole heap of artefacts. They were already here, they were already in boxes. We had some, the Coffs Historical Society collected a whole lot of those, and they put them in the boxes in our museum gallery. Some of those were from George England and other members of that society, some Will Rogers, some individual donors. All up there were 14 boxes, including one that was a men's only, or men's eyes only. In those boxes, there were 197 artefacts. And we've got an idea there on the screen of where those artefacts came from. So that's where this initially started. So while they were sitting in our museum, a couple of people came in and said, "Oh, I'm an elder in this community, I want that box. I want to have a look in it." And they upended it and they just took whatever they wanted, which is totally incorrect. So council, in their wisdom, decided to put those boxes out the back, box them all up again, put them out the back, and kept them in safekeeping. Now, community had said, "We want to know what's in the box. We want to know what's going on. They're our artefacts." And we were waiting for the right time to pull those artefacts out. And we found the Will Rogers collection, or part thereof. And we found that the Will Rogers collection, what had happened in the 1960s, we had sand mining, we had a massive storm come through, and there were thousands of artefacts from that axe factory at Moonee that were uncovered. So people are walking along the beach and they're just collecting pieces and bits and putting them into sugar bags and taking them. Will Rogers and his wife decided that they would collect as many as they could, and they gave them provenance. They drew them, they marked them, they wrote on them, they identified exactly where they came from. And they took them to look after and safekeep. And we're so glad that they did. So what had happened then was Will and his wife moved to Melbourne. And in doing that, they took all of those artefacts with them. When we found out where those artefacts were, we looked at bringing them home, bringing them back. So they were found in the museum in Melbourne. We'd spoken with the curator there, a beautiful man, Dr. Chris Davey, at the Australian Institute of Archaeology. And he said, look, I'm happy to bring these artefacts back. They should be home where they belong. So we brought community in and showed them that initial box of goods. Said, you want to look at those 14 boxes, this is what we got. And the community said, something going on here. You fellas are up to something, aren't you? We said, well, actually we are. Because not only do we want you to look at this box of artefacts and give them provenance, but we want to talk to you about this Will Rogers collection that we've come across. They were ecstatic. They were like, hang on, there's something tricky. You're pulling all our eyes. What's going on? And when they realised that we were fair income and that we were honestly trying to do the right thing, the elders, the Lands Council jumped on board. They absolutely loved it and embraced it. Now, Dr. Davies had volunteered to bring, if we can go to that next one, thank you, had volunteered to bring that collection from Melbourne to put in the car and to drive it up here. And we were lucky in that you'll see on your screen the 4 booklets. I believe there's a 5th booklet as well, but those were the booklets that Will Rogers had done and made, and they were already in our library. So we knew about them, but we didn't know where they were. Finding them in Melbourne was absolutely priceless. That next page will show the detail that Will Rogers and his wife went into to give these artefacts provenance. Those booklets are actually online in the library. You're able to access them. So what we found in amongst that is that we had our initial set from Melbourne. There were 331 pieces in that. We had our the ones that we already had here in our museum. We already had the ones that were there. There was a second box of artefacts which had 21 pieces in it. There was a third box that we came across, which a neighbour of Will Rogers and his wife, Mrs. Walsh, has and still has 121 pieces. And she's asked that we come and collect those and bring them home. And there's a bone in amongst them, and that's what's held us up in going and collecting those. And then there's a 4th set. All of these are tied in with the Will Rogers and their collection. So you'll see on your screen what was in those collections, how much stuff was in those collections. Which makes for a heck of a lot of artefacts that have been removed from this country. So we've tried our best to bring all of those artefacts back home. Some of those now sit within the gallery, the ones that Chris Davies had brought back. If you go to that next slide. So that was the repatriation. In that middle picture, the 4th from your left is Chris Davies. So Chris had offered, as I say, brought them up. Lands Council agreed that those artefacts would go into the care and the safekeeping of the City of Coffs Harbour Council. We had a smoking ceremony to welcome those artefacts home. And we were also able to pull out all of the other artefacts that we had and smoke them at the same time. Smoking gets rid of those bad spirits, allows good spirits in. While we were doing this, we found from Chris Davey that there was a time, now don't worry about, there was a time when Melbourne had sent a whole heap of their artefacts to casino because they thought that they came from there. So they sent them to the train station casino. They asked Uncle Harry Walker, said, "Oh, look, we've sent these up here. Can you go and collect them?" Uncle Harry would collect them. And to keep them safe, he put them under his floorboards in his house. And he forgot about them. And then when they built that new bridge at Tabulum, they had to move his house, and they're like, "Hang on, what's all this?" So we were lucky enough to find them again, and they've now been repatriated back to the Lands Council. That slide you see up there, Joe Besley worked here at City of Coffs Harbour in our gallery, and Chris Davey had asked us to write a paper for him and for his institute to show the steps that we'd gone through. And that's now online if you want to have a look at that. It's a bit of the story of what we did and how we did it. The next slide. So those are the artefacts that were sent to casinos. And the letter was sent to Uncle Harry. So in that there were 120 pieces that were sent. So right throughout that process, the Institute had wanted to do the right thing. They just weren't sure who the right people were. The next slide will show some more of those artefacts that came back. And that last slide will show the second one. That slide that shows the obituary of Mr. Rogers, who was a fantastic man. And the last slide shows some of the collection that Sybil Walsh has in Sydney that we're yet to claim. So apparently there are 221 pieces in her collection. And what had happened was she was a neighbour of the Rogers, and she went out as well and started collecting these things. And she safe keep them as well. Mrs. Walsh is quite elderly, and she wants to see them come home. So the purpose of this presentation is about the partnership that City of Coffs Harbour created with our Aboriginal elders, with our Lands Council, with our other partners. So Dr. Davies, when he came up, he said, "I want to bring them up because there are artefacts from Coffs Harbour, from Gumbaynggirr people, sitting in Armidale University." He said, "So I want to come up and I want to have a yarn to them on the way and see if we can organise those as well." You'd be aware of the bypass going through Coffs Harbour. They found over 6,000 artefacts along that bypass, or presumed artefacts. Probably some of those aren't, but a lot of those will be. Our area here is rich with Aboriginal culture and Aboriginal history through our artefacts, through our language, our songs, and we're trying to relive that, revise that with our library people here at Coffs Harbour, with our council itself, created some great partnerships. And people know that. People around the state know the great work that we've done and the great work that we're yet to do in revitalising all this, bringing all this back home, bringing those artefacts back home and putting them back on country. It's been a great journey. I've only been in the council 6 years. And in that small time that I've been here, we've been able to do a lot of great stuff within community. One of the reasons for that is that when I started in this job as an Aboriginal liaison officer, it was, and one of the ladies, Andrea, had said to me, Uncle, what do you think of this place? How are you fitting in? And I said, I used to drive past this building and think, that council are pretty useless. They could be doing so much more in community and they don't. I don't know why. She said, I'll tell you why. She said, because people jump in with all the right intentions. They'll do the grant application, they'll get the grant, they'll organise the money, they'll organise meetings with the community, and then they might say, we're going to put some artwork on over here. Put the artwork in, and then somebody comes along and says, that bloke don't come from here, he can't paint that. The fella can't tell that story. That person doesn't come from here. They can't do it. They don't have authority. She said, and so we found quite often that we were just pulling stuff back down again. She said, so your job here in council is to make sure we have the right people at the right table at the right time. And with fantastic people like Belinda, who work tirelessly to make sure we do the right thing and we do have the right people. We do have the right people who do welcomes. We do have the right artists. That's made a heck of a difference. And in 6 years, we haven't had to pull down one thing that we've put up because we make sure that we've got the right people at the right place at the right time. I'm secretary for a group called the Local Government Aboriginal Network, and that goes across 120 councils in New South Wales. And we have Aboriginal councillors and positions like myself. We come together and we share information and we talk about the things that we're doing. And everybody's heard about Coffs Harbour and Coffs Harbour Council and the great work that we do over here, including our fantastic building. And that's about me, I think. Happy to take any questions if we have any here or online.
I've got a question.
Yeah.
You mentioned working with the library, and I'd just like to know kind of what that relationship is now, and what you'd like it to be. Is there anything you'd like to do with the library?
The library have been instrumental in not only finding these artefacts for us and finding information about it, but to help us bring it back into help caretake for it. When council looked at building this building, community walked away. They didn't want to be a part of it. And the reason was because people in council had said, we're going to be inclusive of Aboriginal community. We're going to give you a ceremonial place on the third floor and then you can do dances and stuff. Well, community said, no, we don't do that. We don't want to dance on concrete. No. So they walked away. When I came, it was actually before I even came on board, and I was asked to go to a meeting with the architects, and they said, how do we make this place inclusive of community? And I said, you've got to create an ownership in it. 1967, we weren't allowed in new buildings, whether it was a council building, a hospital, a shop, we weren't allowed in new buildings. And that's 58 years ago. And so we need to be able to create something within this building. And so we came on the idea of the track, and you would have seen that when you came in, and if anybody online, if you come to Coffs Harbour, when you walk into our building, you'll see artwork on the ground floor, the first floor, and the second floor. That artwork came from the 6 clan groups of the Gumbaynggirr Nation and tells a story about a particular place in our area. Outside our doors here, we've got the Gumbalama people from Dorrigo. They commissioned Reuben to do the story of Gumgali, the great lizard, the great goanna that came down through the mountain. So he'd done that artwork, and it sits outside outside the doors there, along with the other 5 on the levels. And what the library have done is they've gone, we've got this fantastic artwork, let's put it on our library cards. So if you come and you join the library, and you get your card, you'll end up with one of those pieces of artwork. And they're not going to be there forever. The idea is every 10 years or so, we're going to change those with new artwork. So they'll become collector's items because it's got that story and that artwork on it. But the library didn't even ask me. They said, we should do this. and they just jumped in and they just put it all together. When staff in the building, when departments take that initiative and do that sort of stuff, there's going to come a day where you won't need an identified position in council, and that's what we want to aim for. We don't need to have identified positions. We want for people within our departments and organisations and the councils to go, you know what, there's a cultural way to do this, a right way to do this, and let's go and do it. So I say working with Belinda is fantastic because Belinda's already got that. She understands that and knows that. And I think that a lot of our departments in council, I can be quite busy through the day. I can be, yeah, go over and do this, go over and do that, better this, better that. But people are starting to understand that they can do this stuff themselves. My hope is that I do such a good job that I'll do myself out of the job. Because these fellas know what they're doing, they know how to do it. They've proved that with the Will Rogers collection. They've stepped up to the plate and they've made a massive difference in community. Some of those artefacts that we did have, we talked to our old people, that initial artefacts that were there. We talked to our old people and said, do you want to go through these and find pieces of significance that we can put in our museum? So the elders did. Some of them, they said, no, they don't come from here. That's a different rock altogether, different granite. They don't come from here. So they found the ones that come from here. They were able to give them the provenance. And they said, you know, they would be good to go. The council said they would be good to go in our museum. So the elders went out and they collected soil from the places where those artefacts came from. And then they created a specific box, was showcased down in the museum, and they put those artefacts on that soil, created this beautiful area and atmosphere to showcase these artefacts that were locked away for a long time. That's the love and the ability that people in this building have put into protecting Aboriginal artefacts. Yeah.
I've got a question
Oh,
from
yeah,
online.
yeah.
And sorry, it's just scrolled up, unfortunately. That's my bad. What are the long-term plans for the collection?
It would be ideal to have a keeping place where we can put all of those. A lot of the artefacts they found on the bypass, they're going to place back in the ground. They'll separate the men's and the women's artefacts because they need to be separate, and they'll find a place to put those. The Will Rogers collection would be ideal in an actual keeping place. And, you know, with a bit of luck, we might be able to come to the party with City of Coffs Harbour Council and create that space and that place for those to go into. But looking at it, just off the top of my head, we've got hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of artefacts. And I'm not sure if there's a building big enough to put all of those and to be able to showcase them and give them respect. But certainly I think a lot of them will probably go back into the ground into a safe place. Certainly needs to be a place where they came from. Yeah.
Another question from online. There's a little bit of a comment first. In the 1960s, my grandparents found a single axe head on a Central Coast beach. This is now in our library collection. Uncle, is this single artefact likely to be of interest to the local Aboriginal community and should be repatriated to them? What is your advice?
I would ask the Lands Council in the area. I'd ask them what they think. It may not be an artefact. There are a lot of tools out there that we think are artefacts and they're actually not. Which is, as I say, with the bypass, lots of pieces that they've taken out of there. A lot of those actually aren't artefacts at all. if they contact their local lands council, speak with them, they'll actually send somebody out to have a look at it, and they'll determine, firstly, if it is an artefact, and secondly, if it comes from that area. And then if it does, then they'll give you advice on what to do with it.
Thank you. Another question online. Is there a policy or procedure for recording or cataloguing the First Nations collections that the Coffs Harbour Museum or Library has?
That I can't answer, other than what we already know and what we've already got, and certainly within our booklets.
I don't believe so at this stage. I think it's non-fiction is catalogued as a non-fiction, but that's something we'll definitely look at in the future. Yeah.
Okay. Oh, well, thank you very much. Thank you for having me, and thank you for allowing me your time to tell you about the great, wonderful place that I work in and the great things that I'm allowed to do and able to do.
Thank you.
Thank you. I've got to keep on running.
Yes.
But, yeah,
Can I bring you up a ground?
I'm not there. I've got a couple of things to do. One of the most important things is organising National Fairy Bread Day, because I won't be
Next week.
Yeah.
I'm on it.
Thank you.
Uncle Richard is the National Fairy Bread Day representative at Coffs Harbour Council.
I need a new fairy.
I'm the fairy bread fairy.
Thank you.
Thank you. I forgot to mention as well, the last thing on the agenda is a museum tour. If you'd like to do that, depending on timing.
Okay, welcome back, everyone. We'll go straight to the next speaker, John Johnson from Canada Bay. Are you there?
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Yeah, excellent. And can you see my presentation?
And
Excellent. Well,
hold on a
we're off
second.
to an excellent start.
You're right. Yeah, you're right.
Okay, no worries. All right, well, thank you everybody for your attention. My apologies, this is going to be extremely dry. If there's one thing I love talking about, it's metadata. I can happily spend all day talking about metadata. So bear with me. If you've got any questions, put them in the chat. I'm sorry, I'm getting a bit of echo here. Oh, yeah, that's a bit better. Okay, thanks very much. So I'm going to talk about batch upload, also the use of ISADG and Spidus. So some of you will be using Spidus, some of you will be using other library management systems. I think that some of the things that I say will be useful even if you're not using Spidus. So I'll go on to my first slide. Okay. So Spidus uses ISADG, which stands for International Standard of Archival Description, and the G stands for General. So this is what Spidus uses, and so there are a number of other different archival description systems, but I'll be referring to this one. And there are a number of different levels of description in ISADG. So from font, subfont, series, subseries file, down to item and part. So what I will be concentrating on will be FONS, series, and item records. FONS is basically a fancy French word for collection. So when I refer to a FONS, I'm basically just referring to a collection. Essentially, a FONS is everything that's been created by a particular organisation and has been preserved, and so that's known as a FONS. This is our local studies landing page for Canada Bay. And this one is quite a good illustration. At the top, you have photographs, which are items. So they're catalogued at the item level. Next one below is the map collection, and that's all catalogued at collection level. And then down the bottom of the council archives, and each of the councils is a FONS. So State Records, for example, has thousands of different organisations that they have FONS records for. Here at Canada Bay, we have the current City of Canada Bay Council, Concord Council, Drummoyne Council, and then the Municipal District of Five Dock. And each of those four down the bottom there is a FONS, and most of our council archives are encapsulated within those FONS. The map collection, some of those map collections relate specifically to the councils that are below. In other cases, they're separate ones, like the maps of Wongal country, which you can see there. So those ones were created via workshops. I said I would scan those, so I scanned those and then created a series listing for those. So under the map collection, you'll see each of those under the map collection relates to a specific series of maps. One thing I might point to at the top is Ellen referred to On Your Street, which is a little project that was done here in 2024. And we have uploaded each of those kids' drawings as an item, and then we have a collection called On Your Street. So what I'm going to talk to you today about is actually record creation. So the FONS is Concord Council, the series are Concord electoral rolls, and then the items are the specific roles within those the specific electoral rolls within that Concord electoral rolls collection. So we start in the archive section of SPIDUS, and then I'll go on to my next one. And you will see there that you can do a search in SPIDUS, and you can actually do a search you could do a search for a whole variety of things. I've just put in Concord Council at the FONS level as a search there. And when you actually create your record, you create it within SPIDUS and you can allocate a level to it. So you can see here that you can allocate a FONS, collection, series, file, or an item. So generally speaking, so I'll go on to my next slide. And our step one is to create a FONS record. And a FONS is a series record for everything that's created by council. The description there I stole from State Records. So State Records has got material relating to a number of different councils. Your councils, whichever councils you have records relating to, will probably have a FONS record in the State Records collection. So I just basically stole a big chunk of stuff out of state records to populate that FONS record, as you can see there. Once you have your FONS record, you then can create a child series record. So within the Concord Council records, which is your FONS record, I've then created a series listing called Concord Electoral Rolls. And I've put their title supplied by cataloger because, I basically created that. And if you have a look, you will see that we actually have dates of creation, and I've just now having a look at the dates of creation, I realised that I have made a mistake there. So if you look at search dates, you'll see 1944 to 1960. But the dates of creation I put there is 48 to 61. So that's something I'm now going to have to go back in and actually change. So you create a series listing record as the container for your individual item records. Once you've created your series record, you can actually go in and check it. And you will see there that, as I said, the display dates and the search dates don't match. I think I may have gone in and actually made some changes to that. I'll have to now go in and have a look. And then a scope and contents note. Everything that I put in terms of state, everything that I put in as council archives, I always put in the Canada Bay Council access direction. So if you have a look at restrictions on access, you will see it says unrestricted, then says City of Canada Bay Council access direction 754. So each of your councils will have an access direction which tells you what you can and can't release to the public. Generally speaking, records are in a closed period for 20 or 30 years. Some items will have extended closed periods, but in the main, if it's more than 30 years old, unless there's some specific reason not to release it, then you can release it. So access and restrictions on use are different. So access is unrestricted. Restrictions on use, most material you have in council archives is actually still in copyright because it's never been published. So for anything that we have that is still in copyright, we put a Creative Commons by acknowledgement non-commercial share alike license. The license that I've put there for these ones, that's another one. I stole that one from State Library. So no point in reinventing the wheel. So if somebody's already done a license you're happy with, you can just grab that one and use that. Well, I've grabbed that one to use for myself. So we have our FONS record, then we have a series record. Check the series record to make sure we're happy with it. Then create some, you then have a series of items that you're going to add to that series record. With Spidus, you only add at the item level. So Spidus will only do a batch upload at item level. So in this case, we've got a collection of electoral rolls from 1944 up to 1960. I ran them through optical character recognition and then reduced them in file size. So instead of being 400 to 500 meg each, they ended up being sort of 90 to about 120 meg in size. So create your series of items. You download the ArcLoad template from Spidus. So if you have a look on the left-hand side there, you will see Under archives, you've got other down the bottom there, file upload. When you go into file upload, you can download a file template. And then once you have your file template, you can then populate it. Generally speaking, what I like to do is I like to have the file name reflecting reflecting the content. And so therefore you can reuse the file name. So the file name here is Concord Electoral Roll 1944.pdf. I've then stripped off the PDF extension, then used it as the ID, then also used it as the title as well. Create a Concord Municipal Council. CN2 for the file name, that's corporate name 2, which is direct order. Display date of 1944 because it's a 1944 electoral roll. Date type C is date of creation. Most of the codes that you see here, you will actually be able to access from the Spidus from your when you're actually creating the records. A lot of these codes are already available. Then, as I said, conditions governing access. I've done City of Canada Bay Access Direction 754. My use restriction is that Creative Commons acknowledgement, non-commercial share alike. Conditions governing use, and again, that's just the standard one that I have pinched from State Library. Then a scope and content note, and the scope and content note is basically the same as the scope and content note for the series listing. A subject, an extent of 1 volume, parent ID, which is the series listing name, and then the material type I have put there as TM, which is textual material. You then essentially you have a digital assets folder. You can go in and create extra folders in the digital assets folder. So I tend to do an individual one for each particular file type that I'm using. You'll see here it says 14 files to process. The reason for that is I did a test on the first one. So of the 15 files, I'd already done one, so I only needed to process 14. Then do a validation just to make sure that it's going to work. And if you have a look there, you'll see on the right-hand side the outcome, which is okay. So once you've done that, I have to keep testing and making sure, and I have to keep looking to make sure that that my file works correctly. So we end up then with 14 items to process. Then we do a live and upload them. So we end up with 14 items going up. You'll see there it's uploading, processing 2 of 14 items. So I'll go on to the next one. And then I go in and actually check to make sure that that they have uploaded correctly. You'll notice that there's a duplication there of the 1944 roll. I don't quite know why that happened, but if you have a look, you will see it showing up under similar titles, even though it's actually already part of that that 15 that we've uploaded. So I don't quite know why it's showing up as a similar title. Once you've uploaded into Spidus, about 24 hours later, it shows up in Trove via OAI Harvest. And that's as long as you have your, as long as you're set up so that your OAI Harvest can happen. If you then go in, you will see that I've gone into diaries, letters, and archives, checked for Concord electoral rolls, and you will see there that the first thing that shows up is our series listing, and then down below that are some of those individual items. And doing a search on Concord electoral rolls in Trove, the very first thing that shows up, which I'm very happy about, is my series listing. And then underneath that are those individual items. 23 online, I'm not quite sure. I did 15. I'm not quite sure what else shows up under that Concord electoral roll search. And that's it. Okay, so questions? Any other questions? Anything? I will. I'm happy to share any of the items that I've created. And just at the end here, I've got a link then to the ISAD standard. A link then to the Concord electoral rolls that I've uploaded, and then a link to the electoral rolls that have then been harvested into Trove.
So I'm not sure if you've seen them, but there's quite a few questions in chat.
Oh, okay. All right. Well, I've stopped sharing, so I'll have a bit of a look. Okay. So first one is the version of Spidus that we're using is I think it's whatever is the latest version of Spidus. So we've just had a recent update, and I think that's the so that's the one that we kind of currently have. Okay, so I can get back to you on exactly which version we're doing. Now, I did get some specific training from Civica, but a lot of this has been trial and error on my part. So yeah, that's exactly right. So the training that you get from Civica is pretty basic, and certainly if people are interested, I'm happy to go through this in further detail with people individually. Somebody's asking, I have a million questions. Can I email you with them? And the answer is sure thing. More than happy. Do you have any instructions that you can share with us? What I've got kind of the basic stuff that we've got on Civica, but a lot of this stuff is trial and error. And so people have different ways of learning, and my way of learning tends to be by using my way of learning tends to be by using it, looking at the results, and then refining those results. Yeah, so somebody says really informative, looks quite simple in a sense to get the hang of and use. So yeah, I'd certainly recommend that if you've got Spidus ILMS and you want to use it, then I would certainly recommend going ahead and doing it. What I'd say is we inherited around 10,000 digital objects, mostly photographs that were already in the LMS. But with adding things, I've gone down that hierarchical route. And great that your LMS has an archival module. Do you use it to catalog all digital materials, including photographs? And yes, we use the Spidus LMS for all of our digital materials that we include. Somebody said, I'm going to ask if you'd share your procedure. I'm happy to. happy to share the PowerPoint slideshow. And as I said, I don't have too many notes. As I said, I tend very much to use the thing and store the information in my head. But yeah, I probably need to do a bit more documentation. Was wondering why you had both fonds and collections listed in one of the early slides. I'm not exactly sure what you mean by that. When you are creating a catalogue record in the archival module, you can choose from a variety of different levels. So my thing is always to start at a top level and work my way down. So if I have something, and generally, so I've only got about 4 fonds records, and then everything else then that I put as a series comes under one of those fonds. Somebody says Spidus 11. Can subject headings in archives be linked to authorities in the cataloguing module? I use the headings that are already available in archives. I don't know whether they're the same as the ones in the cataloguing module, but I don't see any reason why you couldn't use those. That's something I might have to do a bit more experimenting on. Were any of these items catalogued on the cataloguing module before you created the new records on the archives module? And all of the material that I have added from Council Archives, none of that had any catalogue. None of those had any catalogue record. So all of this has been done from scratch. Is it possible to hide the record from?
Sorry, John, it's Jane here, just with a further question. What about your map collection, which is on the archives module 2? Were any of those catalogued in the cataloguing module before?
No, none of that material. So all of that material that we've had, I have added to the catalogue.
Okay, thank you.
Yep. Possible to hide the record from public as an option? Yep, it certainly is. You certainly are able to. You certainly are able to hide the record from the public, and that's an option. Don't ask me where it is, but it's definitely an option in there somewhere. Sharing the slideshow, yeah, happy to share the slideshow. What's the difference between fonds and collection hierarchy? A fonds series, yeah. So the thing to me is that essentially what you're doing is you're imposing a collection hierarchy on your items, and so I normally start with fonds. In some cases, I will create a series listing. But generally speaking, you might start at whatever is the highest level you think is appropriate. And with the council archives, I've always started with working out which council they came from and then creating a child record for that fonds. So you start with the fonds. You can then, you can create a sub-fonds underneath that if you really want, but as I said, I have primarily concentrated on fonds, collections, and then items. And when you do a batch upload, you can only do it as item. You can't do it at any higher level than that. It just automatically goes in as an item. Okay.
Thank you, John. That's great. Just a reminder, these slides and minutes will be available on the Local Studies Wiki. So in a couple of weeks. All
right. So thank you, everybody. As I said, a little bit dry, but I certainly think it's something that if you've got a library management system that will cope with multiple levels, I certainly recommend going down that hierarchical road.
That was great. Thank you, John.
Yes, thank you.
Next up, we've got Michelle from Hawkesbury, who'll be talking about uploading her image collection. You there, Michelle?
Yes, I'm here. Can you hear me okay?
Yep, you're fine.
Can you see my slideshow?
Yeah, no.
Can't see it?
You can see you.
Okay, just hang on. I'll share another screen. Can you see it now?
We've got it.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Sorry, just hang on a minute.
Excuse me, Michelle, it looks like you might have a pop-up.
Oh, okay. Oh, I thought I fixed this problem. I've got two screens and it keeps. It worked yesterday, didn't it, Ellen? Hang on. So, does that screen work?
It works. It's really, we've got a black patch on the
That's
bottom.
it. Okay, is that better?
I think we'll live with the black patch.
It's gone.
Oh, good. Yeah, it's gone.
Okay, good.
Right, okay, let's go. Just first of all, I'd like to begin with acknowledging that I am on the land of the Darug people. The Darug people are the traditional owners of this land, and I would also like to acknowledge the Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people present at the meeting today. So my name's Michelle Nichols. I'm the local history librarian. I've been here for over 40 years at Hawkesbury, and our collection, local studies collection, has a wide range of material reflecting all aspects of the Hawkesbury district. And one of the most valued collections in our formats are our photograph collection, and contains images relating to the Hawkesbury district. So we have lots of people images, we have lots of places images, and we have lots of events included in the images. So way back in 1999, we received a grant from the State Library of New South Wales, the Public Library Infrastructure Grants, probably called a different name then, to scan and index our collection. So we selected the Perfect Pictures software that was produced by Search Tech at the time, and I know a lot of other libraries use this software way back. And it made the images were scanned at low resolution just to be used in the database, 72 DPI, and it made the images easy to locate. They weren't included in the catalogue. It was a separate database, and very easy to input the information and upload. All of our images were given a unique number, 6-digit number, and we keep that numbering system still today. In 2002, we launched the database. We had been using it for a while, but we officially launched it, and you could consult it on images, on PCs in the local studies area, separate to our library management system. There was a online version of Perfect Pictures, but we didn't go with this package. This was put out by Media Equation, and Search Tech folded, I think, in about 2019. We had several different library management systems during this time, VTLS and AmLib, And in 2018, we went with a new library management system, AMLib, which is Aurora Library Management System. And we went live with that in 2019, and we were told that at the time that our Perfect Pictures database would transfer into the management system. However, it was a little bit incomplete. You can see that some of those records there, the subject headings that we used and the place names didn't come across, but they ended up being in, they put them in a note field. So they're still searchable, but it wasn't what we were hoping would happen. So I quickly realised that we had an issue with cataloguing ongoing with the new LMS. In the past, I was doing the Perfect Pictures database, and the system was that I had to learn how to catalogue with Aurora. The Aurora Library Management System supports multiple cataloguing standards, with Mark 21 being its primary one. And it also supports Dublin Core, metadata, supports a lot of different formats, but it is very flexible. That's the one good thing about it. So I was struggling a bit with the cataloguing, whereas with the old system, I could upload 100, 200 pictures in a short period of time. It was taking me about 15, 20 minutes to do an item, and with a big backload of images that need to be uploaded, I worked out, roughly 30,000 images, 15 minutes, 7,500 hours. It was going to take me about 4.5 years. And as most of you know, I'm looking down the barrel of retirement, and I don't have 4.5 years to concentrate just on photographs. So I had a discussion with our IT person at the time, Chris, our technical administrator, and he, I guess he listened to me, but he also heard me whinging a lot around the place, saying, "Oh, it's going to take me forever and ever." So what we did was he developed a process of adding bulk images to our current library management system with detailed information. He consulted with the AIT developers and was given the go-ahead. I think I spoke about this a couple of years ago when we were still in the development stage, but we've been using it for a couple of years now. So basically the software he designed converts the images to a suitable upload size, and it creates an Excel file which then can be uploaded to Aurora. The Excel files are converted to the Mark format, which allows Aurora's standard reporting and collection management tool and used to manage the collection. So basically, it enables the simple viewing of the image collection as part of the library catalogue. It isn't 100%, there's a couple of little things that I would change, but it is much, much better than we had previously. And I can see a lot of comparisons with like John's library management system. So this is the uploader which I would use. I just import the images from my computer I usually just have folders on my desktop and put the images in here. It doesn't, you do have to convert them to JPEG, but then it does resize them. So we do all our scanning in high resolution TIFF, but I just use a converter to just convert them to JPEG before I then put them into the system, and it automatically reformats them for me. So a lot of the time-consuming components of the cataloguing and image conversion were automated, and We developed and tweaked it a little bit, and I've been using it for the last few years. So that's another view of adding the when you can see an item in there. So basically what I do is that I create stand in each of the fields. If it's a collection of the Hawkesbury Council's flower show in 2015, I can put the standard photographer, the date, the type, the subjects, the place, and restrictions and any notes all in that, and it will give that same information to all of the photographs. And then I can just go back and modify each one with a different title or whatever. The subject headings and the places are all drop down. Anything with a little arrow can be drop down files. It's just another thing. And you can make changes to apply to one of the series, all of the series. And then it produces a Excel spreadsheet fairly similar to what John's was, which gives you the information. And the good thing is that you can check the Excel spreadsheet. Sometimes you can actually pick up spelling mistakes and things like that much easier in the spreadsheet. And the other good thing about it is I don't have, I only have one person working with me 1 day a week, but there are some people in our cataloguing department that have been assisting me with the cataloguing. And the good thing about it is that I can easily check the work before it's uploaded. And because a lot of our collections come with varying degrees of information, you might get a bunch of historical photos that have no information. Some people give you quite a bit of information with them, so that depends what we add. You can keep working on the work forms you can just save it and come back to it at another time. And if I have cataloguing staff help me with doing some uploading, I can go in and look what they're doing and make any corrections that may be needed. And as soon as you upload them that's the screen, our import screen. So I just upload them in the back end by just uploading the Excel spreadsheet and the image folder. And it's a very, very quick process. And then they're within about 3 minutes or even probably instantaneously, they're uploaded into our image catalogue. And then they're harvested to Trove as per our agreement with Trove. And I just forget really when how often our harvest happens, but they're there anyway. And it does also, that's our search screen. Our search screen is not particularly fabulous, but it does the job. And I think we're going to the new montage screens shortly, so that there may be a different view of that. So basically the uploader provided us some streamlining for me, adding multiple images to our digital collection and making them accessible to the public. And that's my big objective, is making as much of the collection as possible accessible to the public. it automated some of the many time-consuming components. There's still some old records to correct. The keywords need to be added to the subject headings, and that wasn't something that we did ask if they could do that for us, but that can't be done. But at least it's searchable, and that can be that's a job for cataloguing to work on over the coming decades. My thing is more looking after the ones that aren't actually on there. The other thing I didn't mention, that Aurora AIT was acquired by Valeris and Softlink in 2024, and the original AIT staff have all left, and we also have a new IT staff member. So, but fortunately, my knowledge of the database I've been able to correct anything at the moment, but we're not 100% sure of the future with what AIT is doing. So my, in review, I think there's still a lot of images to upload, and I think it was worthwhile thinking outside the box and complaining enough that somebody else saw that I had a big problem, and it was worth taking that leap into. And I don't know if other libraries, obviously Spiders has the archives component, but I'm not sure about what other library management systems people use, and if there's the possibility to have that discussion with the developers to see if there's another way around adding some of our collections. And if anyone has any questions, you're more than welcome to contact me. My details are there. And this was a photo that was donated in the last few months, and I think it's absolutely gorgeous. And we used it on social media post, a Throwback Thursday, and we got one of the most likes that we've had in the collection. So, yeah, there's the family obviously spent a lot of time with the dog dressing it up and taking photographs of it, but this one's one of my favourites. So that's my my little part of the collection. And the other thing, we were hoping to use the system to upload some of our things like our manuscripts, single object, single page things. It will work, and we've done it with paintings. But we also thought that it might be useful for doing things like the rate books or things like that. But it does. I have done some testing and it does work. But I don't know if it's going to clog up when you think about how many digitised pages that we have with thousands of volumes, how it's going to work. And I'm still having those discussions with if there's another way around. Otherwise, I have a lot of digitised material, but I don't have the platform to upload it, and we can't afford Recollect at the moment. So yeah, stuck in a bit of a bind there. So any questions?
Cheryl, there's a question from Kelly on chat.
Okay. No, it was we have a staff member, an IT administrator that works in the library, and he and I worked together. He did the technical stuff. I told him basically what I would like, and he did all the work, and AIT sort of approved it. But now that you've got different staff, I'm not sure if it's a workflow that can be shared. That was my understanding with the original AIT technicians, that they were going to share it as a something as part of AIT, but I'm not sure about that. But if you perhaps contact me, and I'll try and find the best technician to talk to, because all the staff have changed. And I think what Jeff said, yeah. So I'm not exactly sure exactly how many photographs we have, because I always have this problem when I'm filling in the data for the State Library, because we have a lot of our collection was in the 1980s and early 90s. Before scanning, I re-photographed images that we were given access to. So I then produced negatives, and the negative numbers and the other numbers. But we have, I know we have over 100,000 photographs. We probably have even more. So we have a big collection as well, Jeff.
Are you concerned about the material that you can't get onto Aurora, like your rep books?
Yes, I'm very concerned. Yeah. And I've with their new IT staff member, I've raised this issue, and we're having discussions about it. But it does really concern me that I have spent the last, decade or so digitising material, and it's only available on the computer in the library, so people have to come in here. So the understanding when we went to the new LMS, that there were ways to upload PDFs, but I don't think they imagined that the sort of PDFs that we were talking about.
That's one of the issues, isn't it? People don't understand.
Yeah. I really wish that there was like a Trove component, how we add things that we could upload our collections to Trove, so they became part of that searching thing, without that people could still access the collections. But yeah, I don't know. I'm in discussions wherever I can.
Okay, any other questions? Thank you.
Thank you.
Very good.
Thank you. Hi. Good to go. Okay, so my talk is about the Coffs Coast Explorer Heritage Trail project. Next slide. Okay, so just wanted to acknowledge again that this meeting, or coming to you from the lands of the Gumbaynggirr people, and I acknowledge and pay my deepest respects to their elders past, present and emerging. Next slide. Okay, so the Coffs Coast Explorer app. Early in July this year, myself and two of my museum colleagues were approached by the comms and marketing team with a request to help put together a heritage trail for Coffs Harbour. The trail would feature on the Coffs Coast Explorer app, which is an app that's free to download and designed to be a tourism guide for Coffs Harbour and surrounds. In 2021, Coffs Harbour became the first location in New South Wales to receive the Eco Destination certification. So moving away where possible from printed brochures is part of the ecotourism destination thing, so the app was supporting that. Okay, next slide. So there are already 4 existing trails, as you can see, and the link there is to Coffs Collections, which is our library, museum, and galleries collection digitised, and the apps. The existing trails brochures you can find on there. So they started as paper brochures in 2018, but to date there hadn't been one for Coffs Harbour. They were modified and already uploaded to the app prior to us commencing the project for the Coffs Trail. Next. I'm sorry, my slides are very sparse with words, but pictures that I enjoy. So the marketing and comms team wanted to change. Oh, hello. Oh, that's
Yep.
Okay. Wanted to change the tone for the app, so to appeal to a wider audience. The original brochures were extensively researched and very thorough, very informative. But they wanted to make it a little bit more concise and a bit more accessible for the app. So yeah, they just wanted to make it a bit more engaging. And next slide. Sorry, losing track of my notes. So the original brief was for us to provide 18 to 25 stops for the trail. They also wanted us to provide links to information in Coffs Collections and images, and also GPS coordinates for each location. The trail itself would start here at Yarrala Place in Yam, which is Yarrala Arts and Museum downstairs. They wanted stops within walking distance for the CBD would be ideal, but some driving would be okay. The plan was for us to provide the information for each stop, with marketing outsourcing the final copy, so the tone remained consistent and on brand for the app. We opted for History Week in September to be the launch date for the app, with mid-August as the deadline for our contribution. So we met the target of 25 stops fairly quickly. MEM provided close to 40 stops with a write-up of the history of each location, with links to more information, GPS coordinates and photos. But a couple of weeks in, the marketing team member that we were working with called for a progress meeting to discuss what we've provided to date. So it turns out that what we've done so far wasn't quite what they were looking for. What they really wanted was to know things like where the Queen dropped her hanky during her visit in 1970, where were the first bananas planted, and has there been any high-profile crimes in any of the historic pubs? So this detail was new to us, not having been mentioned in the first meeting. I'm leaving my feelings out of this on purpose, by the way. I'm trying to be professional. So in that meeting, I did my best to manage expectations regarding our time constraints and negotiated another couple of weeks to work through the updated request. Next slide, please. Okay, so with the slight shift in goalposts, the total number of stops required for the launch was negotiated down to 10. It was decided that we would start with 10 locations close to the CBD and expand in future. I didn't find any murders in pubs, but did learn that on completion of construction of the Coffs Hotel, they opened the doors a week ahead of the official opening for a preview to select community members. The place was stormed and all sorts of things were souvenirs, tied down or not, including light fittings, doors, chairs, and everything in between. I also couldn't find where the Queen dropped her hanky. One of my colleagues was actually there in 1970 in the crowd, and she didn't know either. But I was able to find a really cute interview where a local person she talked about how she took her corgi and she had her corgi with her in the crowd, and the Queen spotted the corgi and came over for a chat and to pat the dog, which is really nice. Next slide, please. So other stops planned for the future include the 1953 Worth's Circus lion escape at the jetty. So there was an accident with the rail car that the lions were in, and an elephant and some lions escaped and went on a bit of a rampage around town. They were all recaptured without incident following a lovely romp, providing a wholesome afternoon of entertainment / terror for the citizens of the jetty. And we'll also include the Pier Hotel, which is down at the jetty, including Fred Walters and Joe Blake, who were regulars there in the 50s. This is one of my favourite photos of all time. Okay, next. Oh, this is my 100% favourite photo. This is Sam Bailey's prize-winning cow rainbow. So challenges, time. Local studies is my primary role, and I'm in that. I work in local studies 3 days a week. I'm on general cert duties in the library 2 days a week. So being the sole local studies staff member, I was working on this project on top of my BAU tasks, which is quite challenging, fitting everything in. And with the timing of it, approaching Family History Month and History Week was quite hectic. Also at the time, my dear colleagues in the museum were in the process of getting the museum collection ready for a move to a new facility, which is no small feat in itself. So yeah, it's a matter of managing expectations. Next slide. So being relatively new to the role, it was the first time I've worked on a project with another unit within council. In future, I'll be working towards establishing a better understanding of everyone's expectations at the outset to avoid the shifting goalpost scenario that occurred in this case. In the end, it was a really good experience and has added another layer to my professional onion. Thank you very much.
Hello, everybody. Can you all hear me?
Yes.
Thank you. I'm just going to share my screen. I apologize for what just happened. I had a little bit of technical difficulties. My name is Haining. I'm the local studies librarian from the Hillshire Libraries. Before I begin, I'd like to acknowledge that we are meeting on Darug country, and I pay my respects to their ancestors, elders, past and present. At our libraries, we have extensive local histories collection, ranging from books, maps, to photos, oral interviews, and more. Traditionally, these resources have been used mainly by adults, and our local history talks for adults have always been very popular. However, we never run a dedicated local history program for children. How do we engage children and young people, raise their interest in history is a key focus for our local studies team. And today I'd like to share some information about the program that we designed and conducted in July this year, the Local History Mystery Children's Program. So this idea was inspired by the 20th Street Local History Project from the National Archives in UK. If you want to know more about the UK project, I've included a link here. This project sparked an idea for us. What if we created a series of tasks where children had to use our library's local history resources to complete them? That became the foundation for our program, encouraging young people to actively explore history through hands-on discovery. The resources we wanted to promote in our local histories collections include books, subdivision maps, and touch tables. So we designed our tasks to involve all of these resources. After considering many ideas, we finally decided on a treasure hunt themed activity. The background story was, the library has found a very old letter in archives that talks about a secret treasure. A treasure is hidden somewhere in the Hills district waiting to be found. The letter also includes 3 tricky riddles, and each containing a hidden message that leads to the treasure's location. Can you help the library to discover the treasure's secret location? The final location of the treasure is Roughly House, a heritage property owned by the Hillshire Council, which is also a museum open to the public. So this program served 2 purposes: promoting both the library's local history collection and a council heritage property. The program was delivered in a booklet format. All tasks, riddles, clues were clearly explained in the booklet, making it easy for children to understand and follow. Here are the 3 tasks we included. The first task, children need to use the library's catalog computer to locate the book showing here and find a picture of an old steam tram, and they will need to use a riddle and a picture to figure out a number. The second task, children need to use our library's touch table to locate a subdivision map and use the riddle and the map to find out a road name. And the final task, children once again need to use the catalog computer to locate the book and read the chapter that's relevant to the mystery to solve the riddle. Then they will need to combine all 3 answers to reveal the location where the treasure was hidden. We worked with the library's community engagement and marketing team on the graphic design and promotional aspects of this project. All handouts and marketing materials featured the distinctive local history mystery logo, consistent colors, and themed graphics, making it easy for the kids to recognize and follow. The program was held during the July school holidays across all 4 Hills libraries, targeting children in school years E3 to 6. By the end of the school holidays, we were thrilled to see 183 children join the program and 145 completed the activity booklet. Those who finished also received a certificate and a small reward from the library. The feedback was very positive. We received more than 100 written comments. All were very positive. Overall, this program was very well received, and it was really great to see children learning to use the library catalog, discovering historical photos and maps, and engaging with local history. If you want to learn more about this program, please feel free to email me. I've included my email address on the screen. Thank you.
Hi, I'll just share my screen. Can you see my PowerPoint?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, great. Thank you. Okay, I'll get going. Thank you for having me to speak today. I'd like to acknowledge that I'm speaking to you from the land of the Camaragal people and pay my respects to elders past and present. My name's Emilia and I work for the Local Studies Department at Mossman Library in our local studies section. Our digital archive is called Trace and it has over 15,000 items and is always growing. So in 2022, the Local Studies Digital Archive was upgraded to a new platform. And it was done by the same company who'd previously hosted. So it went from Cumulus to Canto. A significant amount of the information and metadata associated with this archive, with the archive items, was lost and or disconnected. Many of the metadata categories, such as keywords, were turned into albums and folders in the new system instead of being attached to the items in their original format. So you can see on the screen, this is what was viewable, accessible to the public. So we had quite a few hundred albums and folders that were created. It also meant that any links that had previously existed between items were lost, and that's just one of the aspects of the metadata that didn't survive the transfer. Oh, sorry. Okay, so after surveying the situation, I implemented a phased plan in order to order the archive and fix the errors which occurred in the transfer. The steps of the audit have included, and this is my document, so it's quite small, obviously surveying the collection after the transfer, condensing and simplifying the Canto folders and albums, adding a landing page and improving the aesthetic of the database, curating each album chronologically and adding a title and description, editing the format of each title and file number to follow a standard format, editing the description and notes for each item so that they follow this standard format. And I'm still on this one at the moment. And the next will be to geolocate each item and item tagging as well. Okay, the next step, I knew that in order to have the most efficient archive, we needed to streamline the cataloging and maintenance. So I created a procedure document so that formats such as titles are followed consistently, and this is for me as well, so that I follow this format. The procedure document is specific to our collection, which I find to be the most helpful, so that anyone using it knows exactly what to do when they're uploading for our specific collection. And in the procedure manual, it includes things like the aims of the document, naming conventions, instructions around tagging albums, folders, links, descriptions, the notes fields, file numbers, and copyright, and also tips and tricks that I've learnt along the way, the hard way. And I know other people have mentioned this before. There's a lot of things when you come onto a system that maybe aren't included in the training, or you forget, having had training once and then something comes up 6 months later, and you sort of have to work it out. So it's all there in the document so that people don't have to struggle. And then, so maintaining and improving the digital archive is not one sudden burst of energy, but requires continuous updating and assessing. It acknowledges that someone working after me might see better ways of doing things and update or change my process. And knowing that an archive is a growing and changing entity. And the lessons I've learned are that keeping your metadata clean, ordered, and consistent is very, very important. Entering everything as you upload an item, even if it might seem time consuming, will save you so much pain down the road. Try to have file numbers which will locate the item in physical space and as part of the collection as a whole, so you can locate the digital and the physical item, and that makes sense, and create a procedure for you and others to follow. So this is what our landing page looks like at the top now. So it's hopefully more inviting for the public, and when you scroll down, it has all the broader picture folders so people can look at categories for our collection. Thank you so much for listening. I'll keep it short and sweet. If you have any questions or any suggestions, please let me know. Thank you.
so I think I'm up next. And everyone, oh, wrong way. Can everyone see that?
Yep.
Awesome. Okay, so good afternoon, and thank you so much for having me today. First, I'd like to acknowledge the land of the Gadigal and Bidjigal peoples of the Eora Nation on which I am located today. I pay my respects to elders past, present, and emerging. So, on the 6th of September, Randwick Library launched our Recollect site, Our Story. Over the past nearly 2 years, we've worked hard to make our story as user-friendly as possible while maintaining high-quality metadata to ensure that every asset is easily searchable and appropriately linked. As we've encountered different challenges or blockades, just sort of due to the nature of the Recollect platform, we have adapted and improved our templates. This has been a process of constant iterations and refinements and has facilitated many detailed and occasionally quite passionate discussions. So, for example, we realized that every aspect of the LGA doesn't need individual information pages about them, but that we'd still like for assets of the same thing to connect with each other. So we've landed on using detailed entries for the aspects with information pages and brief entries for those without. So this has avoided flooding the site with unnecessary empty pages and has limited the assets without linkage. So on the screenshot on the left, you can see we have detailed entries for the Coogee Pavilion and Roslyn House tucked behind it. And we did the brief entries for the historic name for the Coogee Pavilion because we just didn't believe they each needed its own info page. And then the one on the right, you can see we have detailed entries for the hotel on the corner, which is still there today and has a lot of historic value. But the businesses beside it are just brief entries so that any other images that contain them will connect, but they don't need its own info page. We've also simplified how people are recorded. So initially we used separate specific fields such as owner, creator, or mayors in our historic minutes. However, we realized that since the titles of the fields were different, the same name would not connect. We decided to consolidate them under a single people field, adding further details in descriptions where necessary and using the brief and detailed entry system. So this is an example from our historic minutes from 1900s. So we have detailed entries for those with info and brief for those without. And we've just added in the description the mayors for that year instead of linking them separately. So in order to keep all these details and formats consistent, we have created a shared Excel authority file that serves as a central reference for all aspects of the metadata. It contains standardized entries for aspects from the area with added details such as specific dates, information, or geocoordinates for each. So this is an example of our houses and building tab. So you can see the standardized entry, their addresses, some notes, the geocoordinates. We've even color-coded for the info pages. There's even like a list of relevant subject headings from the Library of Congress authorities in this file as well. Using this, we've implemented a blanket no typing metadata in the templates rule, but to copy directly from this authority file. This has ensured that every entry is uniform and it prevents small inconsistencies from breaking the links between assets. So for the launch to the public, we used this year's History Week to create an exhibition of interesting water stories from our area. We created an overall exhibition information page that linked to each featured story, and we added QR codes to our event posters and display panels, allowing visitors to easily explore the site further. We've also extended this advertising beyond the exhibition. So our main library's public lift is now wrapped in historic images of the library, each with QR codes linking to our story. We've placed advertisements on local bus shelters, in the council newsletters, in local magazines, and in the library's regular What's On booklets. So since the launch, we've seen a lot more people discovering the site, and we're receiving more inquiries from the public, including offers to donate items or share personal stories. It has also streamlined some of our day-to-day answering of the inquiries, as patrons can now often be directed to the site. An added benefit of this project is the clearer picture we're gaining of our collection. It's helping us understand where gaps exist across particular time periods or topics. We have currently uploaded around 7,000 individual assets with the goal of reaching approximately 70,000. There's still a long way to go, but we're really proud of how far we've come and of the strong foundation we've built so far. Looking forward, we're keen to continue uploading assets. We also hope to strengthen our connections with other groups in the local area, including historical societies, museums, or schools, to create a truly connected hub for the sharing of the history of Randwick. Thank you so much. Keep it short and sweet.
Okay, thank you. We've got time for a couple of quick questions before lunch. Does anyone have any questions for the presenters? If not, you can probably email them directly. Okay, well, I think that's it for now. Thank you, everyone, for your presentations. They were great. Okay, welcome back, everyone. I hope you all have a lovely lunch.
We did a lot of digitisation.
I'd like to introduce our first speaker for the afternoon, Anne Grifton, who's President of the History Teachers Association of New South Wales, which I think relates to our conversation this morning about getting in touch with schools.
Yep.
So, Anne, you there?
Yep, I'm here. Can you all hear me? Just thumbs up or a wave that you can. Yep, awesome. Well, thank you so much for inviting me. It's really exciting to be here, and I appreciate the opportunity to share some time with you this afternoon. There's a QR code on the slides that you should be able to see, and that's a link to the slides so that you don't have to try and scramble and write everything down. I know this presentation's been recorded as well, but just so that you've got that reassurance there. But first of all, I'm actually going to confess that I am such a library geek. I always make best friends with the librarians at all the schools that I've worked at. And I was actually saying the other day that if I were to have my time again, maybe teaching wouldn't have won out. I might have gone down the library pathway. So in saying that, I am actually incredibly nervous because you're like my local heroes. And that's one of the reasons I wanted to call this presentation that, because I see our local librarians as like heroes in the community doing such amazing work on so many levels. And you know what I'm talking about, from everything you do with the students, with the elderly, with migrants, and all the supports you offer. It's just fantastic. So I have been a teacher for a long time. So what I'm going to talk to you today are just my humble offerings about how we might connect libraries more closely with students and teachers from their local schools. But I really hope this isn't going to be teaching grandma to suck eggs, because you guys are the experts in your area. I'm just an avid fan. So hopefully there'll be a couple of things that come up that you might make you go, But I'm going to take you through the new syllabuses. I'm not sure if you're aware, I'm sure you are aware, but there's a whole raft of new syllabuses coming out for pretty much every subject over the next couple of years. And so I'm going to take you a little bit through the new syllabuses and sort of points where you might be able to connect with them, and how we can turn those content points into connections. So let's get started. So this is the first page you see when you get to the Year 7 to 10 syllabus. I'm going to do this chronologically because that's kind of how the syllabus plays out. And so you can see there that the content, which are those sort of blue rectangles in the middle, are surrounded by historical concepts and skills. And so there's been quite a big shift in this new syllabus to really focus on the concepts and skills. While the outcomes have been present since, the early 90s, it's really in this most recent iteration of the syllabus that we're starting to see a really strong engagement with, the idea of concepts and skills. So this new syllabus is going to be optionally rolled out in 2026, but for most schools it will be 2027. And that's for Year 7 and Year 9 content, or Stage 4 and Stage 5 content. So It depends in your local school how they organise their timetable. But some things to note is that there's a really strengthened focus on First Nations people's experiences and perspectives. So this is now deeply embedded across all stages of learning, as not just a single unit anymore. Another big shift is the focus on civics and citizenship, and this has been a big push from some sort of interest groups across New South Wales, promoting this idea of active citizenship. I think part of it came from the results of the recent referendum, seeing how people weren't engaging with democracy. So the government is really trying to embed that back in the syllabus. It was in there a little bit when we used to have the geography, history, civics and citizenship school certificate in Year 10, but that's long gone. So this is the new attempt. A really interesting thing to think about is that there are no time limits for set topics. So teachers are now free to use their professional judgment as to how long they think they should spend on a topic, and within that topic, how long they should spend on different aspects. So this is actually a really positive shift, I think, because it now means that teachers can make, really informed choices about what's right for their students, and what's right for their local context. So this, I think, will open up some opportunities at a local level for you to engage with schools there. And also there's a new focus on experiential learning, which is quite heartening to see through the site studies and the case studies. And again, there's some really interesting opportunities there. But overarching, as I said earlier, one of the big things that's happening with this new syllabus is the focus on historical inquiry. They are explicit that, basically every unit is to be taught through this lens of historical inquiry. The use of sources is front and center. So that means that, depending on the collections that you have in your library, there are opportunities to really develop that experiential learning and that historical inquiry process. So this slide, I know this slide looks really scary, but it's not really. What it is based on the work of a Canadian academic pair, Peter Seixas and Morton, and they basically, this is called the Big Six historical thinking concepts. You'll notice that we have 5. We have continuity and change, cause and effect, perspective, significance and contestability. Up until this new syllabus, we had empathy, but obviously the government has decided we don't need empathy anymore. But what this is actually a cross-referencing of those historical concepts with historical skills and historical consciousness. So breaking it down. And so when we cross-reference it, it means that we can actually get a much clearer understanding of what schools are having to do with their syllabuses. And so when we, for example, courses, the analysis and use of sources, working with historical evidence, actually helping students to understand how to analyse a primary source, helping teachers understand how to analyse a primary source. A lot of teachers who are teaching history, particularly in years 7 to 10, are out-of-field teachers. A lot of them are RE teachers or English teachers, sometimes even PDH-PE teachers, and they may not have these sorts of skill backgrounds. So I think, and I'll talk a little bit more about this as we go along, but thinking about how you might create templates to support both teachers and students in using sources that are in your collection. So thinking of, thinking about source credibility, there's a range of different frameworks, and I'll talk about that a little bit more as we go along too. But this then connects to the idea of significance, it connects to perspectives, so by focusing on a skill, we can ripple out into the concepts. And then there's the idea of thinking about historical significance or continuity and change and perspectives. They connect to research. I mean, you could pretty much, for the analysis and use of sources, connect those explicitly to all of those concepts and research as well. But particularly, I was thinking within a librarian's or a local library's context, thinking about running sessions on using multiple search platforms to provide ideas about continuity and change and historical perspectives and information triangulation. And thinking about citations and academic honesty, particularly in an age of AI. It's really interesting, just anecdotally, and I have very little evidence, quantitative data to support this, but talking with history teachers, they're not so worried about AI use in history. It's interesting because generally the students enjoy the stories so much that they don't want to bother, AI to get it writing. So what they're using AI for to do is basically use it as an enhanced Google, but they're actually learning and engaging with the material itself. But we can talk a bit more about AI if you want to later. So actually getting onto the curriculum then. So this is basically where we start. Would be the opening unit for stage 4, so probably year 7, but again, depending on the school, they might have year 8 history and year 7 geography, it just depends. So I've listed some of the possible content points that might be of interest, particularly to a local context, and then thinking about how we might connect those across to what's in your collections. So the new syllabus is really pushing us beyond the textbook, which is really heartening to see. It's interesting to note that the syllabus for the first time has a reference list. They've actually engaged with evidence to inform its approach to history. So that kind of gives us permission to do the same. But when we're thinking about the ancient past, and I'm not just even talking about ancient Australia, the tendency is for teachers to go to books, but thinking about your collections, there might be art, there might be iconography, there might be oral traditions, there might be site reports of digs that have been in your area. So finding a diversity of sources, and particularly with the new focus on Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander histories and cultures, moving the students beyond that sort of surface level, particularly in some metropolitan regions, there can be quite a sense of disengagement from First Nations histories and cultures. So opening up how we might sort of connect them with that. And that could be through those oral traditions, it could be through artifacts, it could be through artworks, etc. There's also the idea of the other kinds of technologies that we can be using, like the new mapping skills and the databases that have access to maps. So the idea of bridging that ancient history and modern science together. And thinking about too the role of libraries in preserving the past and conserving the past. Thinking about being explicit about what the library does in terms of protecting it. So that could even just be, a Zoom talk to the local school about, when they get to this point in the syllabus, about what you've done in your local library to actually sort of connect with protecting and preserving the past. So then that first unit is really just an overview, but it's here that we start to really get into the core content. And so this is one of the sort of new topics. It's sort of been touched on a little bit over time in the different syllabuses, but contact and colonization history is really front and center in this new syllabus. And a lot of teachers are very nervous about teaching this. They are very worried about doing the right thing or more sort of to the point, doing the wrong thing. So they're worried that they might get language wrong, or they might get, understandings wrong. So showing what resources you have in your collection, any contacts you have, etc., would be a really big help, because this is one of the new pain points. The other reason why this is a tricky area, sorry, I missed a page. Sorry, wow. So thinking about those resources again to make it localized. So thinking about your the early settler diaries, if that's something that you've got happening in your area, government gazettes, the local police reports about the localized violence, or even stories of Aboriginal resistance. And I talked a little bit about this before, but if there's anything you've got in terms of like physical kits, like making copies and laminating them so that they can be loaned out to schools or something, students love physical history and they love looking at photos and things that don't require words, which, because they're bombarded with so much language all day, every day. So something that's a little bit different can be really, really powerful. And I've yet to see a student who doesn't get jazzed from holding something, but like even with my university class, I took in some 2,000-year-old Roman bronze dies and they were acting like, 5-year-olds. I was so excited. So something that can connect them physically to the past is really great. And even then and now photos showing, a building, a famous building in town, what it looks like now, and then what it looked like in the past, and even like how it's changed over time and getting them to do a comparison and contrast. So like setting up those sorts of resources for teachers so that, that because as we know, I mean, everyone's busy, but teachers particularly feel that burden. And so having those resources that kind of are just grab and go kind of things would be really super helpful. And some of the things I know, like at my one of my previous schools, during NAIDOC week, which happens in schools, because NAIDOC week actually happens during the school holidays, but most schools have something in term 3. So they would actually do a First Nations author spotlight, and so look at the different resources they had in their collections, art, poetry, novels, plays, memoirs, etc., to highlight those connections and letting the schools know about it so that that they can sort of think about taking the students down there. And I will talk a little bit about excursions later, but even things like comparative source packs, because you might have local newspaper resources or archives that talk about a particular event. And so if that event was big enough, like looking at what a Sydney newspaper was saying, or what even a London newspaper was saying, we don't often stop to think about it. But some of these conflicts were actually recorded, in overseas newspapers. And so, that helps with that idea of historical perspectives. So again, putting together not just, one source, but a few sources that are all connected that show differing perspectives or change in continuity, can really help teachers put that into practice with the students. And then there's things like historical context timelines. This could be like a visual display, or it could be something that you do online, that schools can access. But I went to a really great talk by Grace Karskens the other day, and she reminded me that what we call the Frontier Wars, and now we have Rachel Perkins' series, The Australian Wars. We tend to think of wars as being like 1914 to 1918, etc. But the Frontier Wars basically had changing sort of locations and timelines and so forth. So, for example, in New South Wales, it's basically from 1788 through to the 1850s. But in the 1850s, it's only just getting started in Western Australia, and it's really interesting. Like she showed some really cool images that showed, massacre spots in Western Australia in 1932, and then she's showing a streetscape of Perth in 1932. So it's kind of it's finding out the woolly mammoths lived at the same time as the pyramids. So helping students to understand that the Australian wars and these frontier conflicts are not just a series of or like just a series of battles, in one spot. It was a rolling front. So thinking about it in that sense. Okay. And then there's stage 5. So that's the Australian focus with federation and sorry, not federation, with frontier conflict is perhaps the biggest change with the new syllabuses. There's still all the ancient Egypts and medieval worlds and those sorts of things. Again, what we're seeing moving into stage 5 is a much more Australian focus, front and centre. And this, again, is a really challenging topic for teachers. This particular one, Australia making a nation from federation to World War One. World War One, teachers feel very comfortable with, but they don't like federation. I love it. I think it's, astonishing, and there's some great little stories when you go digging about federation. But generally, teachers think of it as boring because there are no battles, that sort of thing. But there are riots, there are rallies, so looking at your local history to kind of spice things up a bit. And looking at local issues around federation, for example, we know immigration was a hot topic. And so your local area might have, Chinese in the area from from the gold rushes, or they might have Afghan cameleers. They might have Italian fishers on the coast, like the New Italy community, which I think is a bit north of Coffs Harbour, because I've actually done some work with schools along the north coast, and I've ducked into the New Italy Museum, and it was fascinating. There's also the Scandies that were working in the timber industry. So thinking about, there's that whole migration myth that prior to 1901 or even 1945, with the populate or perish policy, that there's this idea that, Australia didn't encourage immigration, but it was actually much more diverse than we give it credit for, and particularly in New South Wales. So thinking about, how you could connect with that, and that again gives students something to connect with, because it's their local area. And we shouldn't underestimate how interested students actually are in their local history. I'll give you some more examples a bit later, but generally I've found that when I show students an old photo of the school or an old photo of the suburb, or we look at street names and what the street names used to be called, they love it because it's something that they understand. It's real to them. So thinking about what's real for the students in your context, and then sort of looking at how we can connect that to the past. There's also things in terms of federation about local industries. So many of the regional areas had their own sort of like micro industries. And so thinking about, was industry going to be affected by protectionism? And students these days are very economically aware. They hear about house prices and real estate. They hear about, things closing down. So thinking about how that anxiety would have played out in the local community. And then you could look at stories of badly behaved, women in your area because, and when I mean badly behaved, actually like wanting rights and the capacity to vote. I'm sure there were feisty blue stockings in every town. And so looking at, whether or not we could raise their profile a little bit. And World War One, you can kind of think about that, you've got all those wonderful diaries and letters, if you've got those in your collections, you might have propaganda posters from the local area, using charity events, if there are any responses, local responses to the Armenian genocide. Australia actually was one of the most active countries in supporting Armenia from the Armenian genocide. And, they were setting up orphanages, doing fundraisers. And that's right across Australia. So you might want to look at whether or not your community was involved in any of those sorts of things, or the Red Cross. And then I was thinking post World War One, there's also, the rise of extremism and, communism and fascism. Maybe I was thinking getting in Australia, we don't really ban books, but books that were disapproved, disapproved of. And so maybe having a display of those books, I say banned books, Stephen King says the sure way to get a teenager to read a book is to ban it. And I know that was true for me with Flowers in the Attic back in the 80s. So thinking about that, so connecting the micro history to the macro history. And I put these two images in here for a particular reason, because first one is the Nowra show. And I thought kids understand the show. So when you're talking about, early 1900s history, it can be talking about what people did for fun, and how is this similar? How is this different to the show now? What did they do at the show? It's one of those things in the continuity and change concept that we can show that they can connect with. And the other one is actually from a story on Chinese restaurants across Australia. And I've actually got a friend, this was inspired by chatting with a friend who's about to embark on that, the road trip around Australia. I've seen something pop up about the Christian Temperance Union. Ooh, that sounds exciting. They say that, you could do the Odd Fellows communities because there's all those old buildings in some of the towns as well. But yeah, a friend of mine is doing that tour around Australia, and she wants to visit every Chinese restaurant she can find in the old towns. And so, and that's where, like families grew up. You'd walk in and kids doing their homework, grandma's out the back, and sometimes they have the round doors and those sorts of things. So connect, food is a great way to get teenagers interested. So thinking about how you can use those food connections in your community as well. So this is the latter part of the stage 5. This is Australia at war in the Second World War. So again, this is something that sort of teachers are very familiar with at a macro level. I think they're really good at understanding, particularly, Australia's involvement in the war. But again, making it personal and bringing it back. World War II has been on the syllabus for decades, but now it's got its own standalone topic. So, thinking about why did locals sign up, particularly when they could see the damage that had been done as a result of World War One, like communities were decimated as a result of the losses in World War One. So, why would people think about signing up again? Particularly for the European War. Remember the Asia Pacific War didn't start until 1941 and even 1942 for Australia. So that wasn't an immediate threat. So, thinking about the enlistment activities, and then once the war is underway, thinking about those internment experiences, and we're very familiar with Cowra, but there were internment facilities, in various locations around New South Wales, in Long Bay, in Liverpool, Holsworthy, and Hay. So looking at the experiences there and how the local communities felt about them. Looking at the US soldiers' involvement in Australia, oversexed and overpaid and over here. I know that was the UK, but I think, it's interesting. Australia loved the US soldiers. And I love that photo that was from the Katoomba Library. There was actually like a parade in Katoomba of American soldiers in March 1942. Now, thinking that Pearl Harbor only happened in 1941, to get those soldiers mobilized, on a ship out to Australia with a marching band, that's pretty impressive. And what does that say about, you have to wonder if any of the soldiers, connected with the local girls and whether or not they stayed behind in Australia after the war. And then even after the war's finished, looking at, I was thinking about the soldier settlement schemes and thinking about, there could be, again, they were rolled out in all the different areas, Dorrigo, Tuckadder, in Sydney, Bankstown, Seven Hills, Batlow, Glen Innes, so looking at that rebuilding of the community after the war, and, how that might have changed the narrative of your local area. And thinking about, did they change street names? A lot of street names were changed after World War One and World War Two, thinking that the soldiers would like to walk down Verdun Street, not realizing that the soldiers were getting PTSD from walking down Verdun Street. They learned a lot of lessons from World War One moving to post-World War Two. But again, I was just thinking, using maps to look at how your local town has changed as a result of wars or other, conflicts or other reasons is really cool, because kids are looking for their street, they're looking for their house. So thinking about how we can make use of that personal connection. And then we move into, this is again one of those brief topics, but again, it gives you scope to do so much. It's an overview topic. And you can see there, basically you're supposed to do this in like 3 lessons. So, hey, you'll just do the Cold War, civil rights, cultural and economic rights, new technologies, environmental issues. But there's actually fun little things you could do here. I know that one librarian I worked with at a school, she would have a rotary phone. And like this, the students would go, like, this is only about 10 years ago. So phones were, mobile phones were sort of in power, but the kids just didn't know how to use a rotary, like they, dangling the cord and stuff. So something like that can spark a conversation. As I said, the physical past is great. One school I was at, this is going back a bit longer, but the technology teacher had an old Macintosh computer, one of those brick things. It was one of the original personal computers. And he plugged it in, booted it up, started working. And like students were like, it's black and white. It's not a touch screen. And so things that, are familiar but not familiar. So if you have any objects or access to those sorts of objects, again, they can really engage the students, in a different way. Even kitchen equipment, because most students have to do some form of food technology between 7 to 10. And so thinking about, these days we've got mixers, but you could get like hand beaters, there's sliding measuring spoons and so forth. So, even offering to host movie nights for the school, because sometimes schools have issues with having students on grounds after hours. So hosting historical movie nights, maybe Wake and Fright from 1970s Australia, that could be fun. So there's this as a taster could be really fun at hooking some of the students in. I'm just conscious of time. Okay. You know what? I'll just leave it out. That one's kind of not so relevant because this has been around for a long time. But I want to talk about modern and ancient history because here's where you could do some really amazing stuff. Um, in modern and ancient history, you've kind of got a captive audience in some ways because they have to do an historical investigation in year 11 and in year 12 for both subjects. And they're worth like 30 to 40% of their final HS, like their HSC school marks. So that means you've got a great opportunity to provide scaffolds and supports. So again, thinking about, maybe creating I know this sounds crazy, but I actually did this for the first time a few weeks ago and it worked a charm is a digital like escape room. So you could actually get them to learn like historical skills as they're doing the room. There's a woman called Pocketful of Primary on YouTube, and she actually explains how to create a digital escape room just using Google Forms. It's really straightforward. She's got a great handout to help you with that. But again, it's a really nice way of helping, a fun way of helping students engage, and you could promote that to the local schools. Giving them access to living libraries. I was at one school and they used to have a living library and they'd bring in, migrants, they'd bring in refugees, veterans, people who'd been in different conflicts. And so the girls at the school could actually loan a person and do oral history with them. So, that was a wonderful opportunity. And the girls came away completely changed from having those conversations. And I've got a couple of weird photos there, but the one at the top right-hand side made me laugh because I thought I'd do a bit of a deep dive through some of your library sites. And I thought that's the Mildura Fruit Company's company picnic in 1921. Gee, they're having fun. But again, it's something familiar that the students they understand picnics, but look at the way they're dressed. Do they look like they're having fun? Why are they having a picnic? Do we still have company picnics? So again, using something sort of semi-familiar, but that's not quite familiar. And the idea of a milk bar, I just read a fantastic project for the National History Competition on milk bars in Australia, actually in Sydney. And because this girl, her grandfather ran one of the first Greek milk bars. And so there's lots of opportunities in those year 11 projects, particularly to sort of like pursue everything, but teachers might need help in terms of scaffolds for annotated bibliographies, for referencing, etc. And history extension, again, there's so much there that could be supported, similar to, what I was talking about with the year 11 and 12 projects. History extension, it has three components. It has learning about general historiography, then a case study of historiography, then there's a project. And I know the State Library does an amazing day for the history project. There's no reason why you couldn't get in contact with them and look at running a mini one in your local area to support schools, that get students coming in from a range of different schools and hold an afternoon. And honest to goodness, the HTA would be more than willing to have a speaker zoom into your area to talk about the project. We've got a whole bunch of teachers who are passionate about history extension, so that might be something for you to think about as well. So these are just some things I wanted to mention about how you can, I've already talked about a lot of these, but the first thing I would say, as I mentioned, teachers being busy, is get in touch with your local schools and their head of history or their head of HISI. It depends, like different schools have different titles, and ask for their scope and sequence and that's basically their overview of what they're teaching each year group and at what time. With that, you can then do some source mapping and create resource lists. Teachers love new content and new ideas, but they don't have time to find it unless it's put in front of them. So if you say to them, hey, give me your scope and sequence, and I'll give you a list of all the resources or the best resources we have for this, they will go, chef's kiss. So that would be the first place I would start. Then, once you've kind of got that in place, because, they're going, wow, isn't our local library awesome? They've given us these curated resource lists. I'd be thinking about how to, maybe providing some other things. I noticed that you're doing, history on World War One. Here are some soldiers' letters. Here's a little resource kit I've done. Or here's a source analysis I've created for you. And they're like, chef's kiss, love it. Okay, so thinking about those sort of resources. Teachers, would love to be able to do all these themselves. And it doesn't have to be a lot. I'm not talking like these massive boxes. It could just be one or two really beautifully designed sourcings. The QR code you can see there, that was actually a different presentation I did for history teachers on source analysis. So that's actually got a whole bunch of different source analysis strategies there that you might want to adapt and adopt, just to give you some ideas. So feel free. We've talked about the object box, the show and tell. Teachers don't know what they don't know. I was at a talk a few weeks ago at the Museum of Sydney, and I was standing outside with some of the teachers, and I was saying, "Oh," and one of them said, "Oh, I've never been here," and I was like, "What?" And so they don't know what they don't know, and so if you put on free wine and cheese, come down and check out your local library. Look at what we have here. Again, if you wanted someone from the History Teachers Association to zoom in and do a talk, we're more than happy to do that. Or you might just want to run a Q&A session with the teachers. But it's free food, free entertainment, and an opportunity to connect and network. They'll really enjoy that as well. Don't do it around marking time. Early term one's your best option because, they're, probably around week 3 or 4 or 5, because they're not getting too busy at that stage. Competitions are really crucial because that's a way to hook the kids in. I've just come off looking at National History Competition and Simpson Prize entries, and they are astonishing. And it's a way to connect students with the past. Sometimes the schools are, oh, it says this QR code for creating connections. Oh, sorry. Oh, I tested it this morning. I'll send it through in a second if you just wait till the Q&A. But yeah, the competitions is great because sometimes the schools are too busy to run them or they need help running them. National History Competition just has a theme and every year, and students can do a documentary. Honest to goodness, the ones that I saw were just, this kid did a documentary on comfort women in South Korea. I'm just trying to think. There was one on surfing as a form of protest in Australia. Just amazing things. And kids are coming to this through their family connections and their local histories. Sponsor a prize. I know that Wollongong Library does this really great image competition. So I think the students have to find an image in their library and then do some research around the image. So opportunities there. And it doesn't have to be a big prize. Sometimes just getting the certificate and having a little awards session. I mean, you'll get the parents in as well. That buys some incredible goodwill. And also, as I said, research templates and offering work. One local history, it was like a little local history museum. They contacted the school and said, "Oh, any students interested in doing some transcribing for us?" And so I mentioned it to my elective history class. A couple of boys went along as a bit of a kind of lol. And they loved it. And so by the time they finished, they had more help than they needed. So, because a lot of schools run like Duke of Ed, where they've got to do a service component, or they do like other social justice or community service programs. So if you call the school's receptionist, they can tell you who's running that program and you can reach out to them. So, oh, okay, great. So it seems to be working. Awesome. So I've only left us 4 minutes for question time. I'm sorry. Yammering, and there's my favorite library in the entire world. I know it's very fancy, but it's very cute. So are there any questions that I can help anyone with? Awesome. So there you go. You've got a 4-minute early mark. If there are any questions, just reach out to me. You can find me really easily on LinkedIn. But thank you for the invitation. I hope I wasn't teaching grammar to suck eggs. Primary school wasn't in my brief, I'm sorry, but pretty much everything I said would still apply to primary kids. So,
thank you.
Thank you.
That's really, really helpful.
Thank
and
you.
useful.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Okay.
Vanessa is on her way.
Okay, the next speaker is on her way. Just give us a couple of minutes.
If I look out the door, she's going to come.
That was really good.
Oh, I know. I've got some new thoughts.
Yeah,
That's awesome.
it still is about self-promotion, it's still about promoting what we do, but in a different way.
We've been meaning to go for a while, so it's great to be sort of reminded and inspired and a bit more confident. Thank you.
I do know I was preparing for an exhibition one year, and it was during HSC time, and I had these big ledgers out, and they were being used by someone in the 30s as a scrapbook with all newspaper articles. And one of the students who was clearly getting fed up with studying wandered into local study and looked at the big ledgers and said, "What are they?" I said, "They're scrapbooks." "Scrapbooks? What are scrapbooks?" And I thought, oh, because I just took, because we had so many scrapbooks. And she was fascinated by them. So when she finished the HSC, she came in wanting to look at more. It was great. Yeah, it's awesome. But it's just that we forget that some people don't know what we've got.
I do. So if you control of the slide. Hello, how are you going? Hello. What? Apologies that I'm one of these late comers, but putting in a USB. Is everyone here in the room local? That's right. I'm a localish. Localish. Local enough to be able to get back before the 8th of February. Yes. I'll do a little spruik at the end. So in terms of visuals, you stand here. Yeah. So fabulous. We've got the cameras up in the corner there. So we've got people online. So if you sort of stand here, then they'll catch you there. And the speaker is above your head. Wonderful. So it's my great pleasure to introduce Vanessa Jacob, who is Senior Curator at YAM.
Screen share.
Yarrallah Arts and Museum. Sorry. Is that the clicky thing? If you just let Ellen know, she'll skip through the slides. Sorry. That's quite all right. I love that picture. Good afternoon, everyone. Lovely to be here. My name is Vanessa Jacob, as said, and I'd just like to acknowledge that we're meeting here on Gumbaynggirr country this afternoon. Thanks for being here all day on this beautiful land, and I'd just like to use the opportunity to pay my respects to elders past, present, and recognise Gumbaynggirr people's continuous connection to country. The Gumbaynggirr community was really integral to part of the story for Swell Chasers, which I'm going to share with you, one of our largest community engagement undertakings to date. You may or may not know Yarrallah Arts and Museum opened in September 2023, and it was actually the first time that the former Coffs Harbour Regional Gallery and the Coffs Harbour Regional Museum are co-located. So we're one entity now as Yarrallah Arts and Museum, and that's at the time when I started working with this organisation. And that's something that I'm particularly very passionate about, is the fact that arts and history and technology and science, none of those things, I mean, yes, you can look at them in different lights, but all of the intersections and how those stories are all reliant on one another and how they intersect is what gets me the most excited. And that's something that we're able to achieve with our remit at Yarrallah Arts and Museum, and importantly, what we were able to achieve for the Swell Chasers exhibition, which was a real celebration of looking at social history, contemporary art, and all of the stories in between. And I'll be sharing today just a bit about some of the rabbit holes that we were able to go down as a result of local studies material. So this exhibition comprised more than 500 physical objects on display, roughly about 1,500 digital images we managed to squeeze in various formats, And that doesn't actually include sort of the reproduced photography that's on the wall as well. So a really wonderful opportunity that allowed us to get to know a very important part of the community here in Coffs Harbour, those who are connected either physically by getting in the surf every day of their life, or having some kind of, even just being someone that lives in this Coffs Coast environment. We were really interested in showcasing surf stories. And by stories of the Mid-North Coast, it means that it can be all of the different types of experiences, not only surfers, but we were trying to think about how can we attract all of our audience, well, as much as possible, various different audiences in our community to feel connected to this topic. So I think what I'll do is if we just go through to the second slide. Okay, so essentially, I will give a little bit more of a background into how on earth we got to the works that are on the wall. We're very fortunate. I'm standing here as senior curator, but in order to have an exhibition of this size and scale, it's essential that we work collaboratively as a team. And what was really exciting about this exhibition was just how collaborative it was, not only with our community, but also within our organisation. So there's myself, another full-time curator, Ash Frost. We also have 2 collection officers that work full-time, working with our 20,000 object social history collection, which incorporates roughly up to about 1,000 objects in our art collection. We have our local studies officer, BJ, Belinda. We also have program facilitators that look at education school programs, public programs for all ages and generations. We have an install technician, and at the moment, which is why for those of you who are on off-site, everyone else gets to see me, I apologise, in my paint clothes and also boots, because we're currently in the midst of installing our big summer exhibition, summer exhibitions for the which opened this Saturday. And but this was exactly what we were doing this time last year for our summer show. So in terms of the year that, so huge big team effort, and of course in doing that, starting with none of that was possible without there were about 200 stakeholders that we managed to engage, whether they were people that offered loan material or also people that came in and actually helped tell stories, and importantly, find people. So the fun thing is, I am by no means, I've never stepped on a surfboard. So that's also what's really fun about, as I imagine we all work in our industry, we're learning things day in, day out, and you get to know through all the source material and become, you know, I want to say I knew a lot about surfing 12 months ago, and hopefully there's a lot still there, but isn't it fun about what you just learned through the process of research? So this first thematic here was actually the culmination of a whole lot of engagement with parts of our Gumbaynggirr community. We didn't have a long lead time for this show, so it really, everything that came together probably in a 6 months with some extra kind of, research beforehand. But it meant that it was very hands-on from start to finish. And what was really beautiful and exciting about the Gumbaynggirr stories is that what we represented here on the walls were stories of the people that were available during that period of engagement to work with us to select material, and actually we installed the material with help from some Gumbaynggirr community members during the install period, because of course there were so many stories that could be included, and we showcased ones that we were able to work with people directly, and some really, really important bodies of work. So on the, as I mentioned, it's a social history and a contemporary art all entwined, intermixed. So as you can see, and it was an opportunity for us not only to harness existing works predominantly in our contemporary art collection, because what was really interesting is that we don't really, apart from a surfboard that's on display in our Yamaga exhibition, which the people in the room get a chance to see after this presentation, is one of the only physical surfing related objects, apart from wonderful stuff in our archives, that we actually had. So the other thing to note is that pretty much almost everything in this exhibition, apart from a handful of things, is all on loan, which we know how much fun that is to wrangle as well. So it was just so rewarding. So this here is a snapshot of some key stories of, importantly, when working with the Gumbaynggirr community, when we decided on what was going to be displayed and where, it was acknowledging the different generations of people that have very strong connections to building this surfing legacy. And when I talk about surfing here, also important to acknowledge that we're talking about modern day surfing, so sort of from the 1960s-ish onwards. There were some very key families, in particular the Ferguson family and the Mercy family, who are represented here on the wall, that have descendants today, here living still in the area, that were very key to bringing, well, actually very amazing surfers. So Andrew Ferguson Jr. and Eric Mercy were two surfers in the 90s, both Gumbaynggirr and also Bundjalung men, that were represented by Rip Curl and I have a mental blank. But the other one of the other really big surfing, you can see I'm trawling my brain from 12 months ago now. But yeah, two of the big surf companies. So that was incredible. But the thing that just is the thread throughout the whole show is just how important it was for community within the surfing community. So there are really strong stories in here that are represented through the photographs of actually how Eric Mercy, as an example, actually established a Aboriginal surf camp that happened throughout the 90s, where a whole lot of kids would go and learn not only how to surf, but of course, learning about connection to culture. The most important, what's really special about this region is that the totem for Gumbaynggirr people is the ocean. So there's just added layers, and also one of the key creation stories for this region at the two sacred sites that are down at the jetty, Mutton Bird Island. They are key, particularly the women's meeting place is actually the site of the creation story of how this area came to be. So, and I encourage you to go and read more about the creation story with relation, which you do get to understand bits and pieces of it through our Yamaga exhibition as well, which was working with those community groups. So there are so many reasons why this exhibition was so important outside the walls as well as inside the walls. And so it was really wonderful to acknowledge those families and their contribution. And the beautiful thing about the Mercy story is that you see the photographs in the centre of that image there. That is sort of the both Eric Mercy and Andrew Ferguson Jr. have unfortunately both passed. And so working with family to have the permission to actually produce those photographs, we did that direct with them, and we have subsequently, as they were loans, passed the digital copies back to the family so that we had all of those protocols covered in terms of reuse. But also in terms of what happened in the 90s, what you see on the right-hand side, which is this amazing, the great Rashi vest there, which is Nauru. Now, the Nauru Surf Organisation is something that this region can be very proud of, which is actually has been established by Amber and her brother, who are both the children of Eric Mercy. So, and that's actually in honour of all the work that their father Eric was doing in the 90s, sharing culture through learning how to surf and being on the water. And they're doing that today, and it's one of the largest Aboriginal-owned surf organisations in the country. So a really beautiful story. And so that's kind of, once again, you can't see to the left, that was some of the early generations, then the Mercy and the Fergusons, and then kind of the current generation through Nauru. And we're also hearing in the centre, Coffs Harbour is very lucky to be the home of the very well-known free surfer, Otis Carey, who is also an amazing artist, and is that's his art piece in the centre, which is actually fortunately part of our collection. And the surfboard, which is one of those really fun stories that came out of this whole research, is actually the surfboard was on loan from someone that was in it actually is a GP across the road. And when he found out about the project, which is what I should talk to you about in a second, he was like, I've got a surfboard that was painted by Otis Carey. Would you like to borrow it for the exhibition? And we said, of course. So maybe if we, so it's really exciting to acknowledge someone. Of course, you could put so much material about Otis in the exhibition. We tried, where possible, to dot it throughout the show. So it was there was that wanting to acknowledge the Gumbaynggirr history and ongoing connection to the area through surf in the exhibition, as you know, the first thing that you do as you approach the exhibition, but also not wanting to put it in one part of the exhibition. So it was then our decision to then weave those stories throughout the exhibition. And so you'll see, in terms of other content, Otis is featured in the photograph, or he's featured in the video, a surf film. Amber's they've got trophies, and other people that have won awards in different community areas, so that all of that, there are lots of ways to see how people are, how it's all interconnected. And I guess that's what was the important thing about this exhibition, is that once we started talking to people, everybody was connected in some way. So if you won't mind just having a look at the next image there, that's a reference of some of those other key pieces related to the Craig family, the Ferguson family, the Mercy family. And up the top there, that surfboard, which has been designed in the Aboriginal red, yellow and black colours, was actually made by one of the key surfboard shapers of this region, who is non-Aboriginal, who made that for Uncle Ken Craig's 50th birthday. And it's one of those things where another really important story was referencing about how in the 60s, it was kind of like on the water. Everyone talks about how it doesn't matter what colour your skin was. Everyone was a surfer, and everyone, it was one big community, something that has not always continued, of course, but there are actually 4 different films that were on that TV telling different stories throughout different generations as well. So that was a lot of engagement to get to that point, which was really, really rewarding. If we flick through to another kind of section, I think this is where we maybe go on to looking at so the other themes here we've got, and this is one that's really relevant for our topic today, in terms of that secondary and primary source material and rabbit holes, is this section here is looking at ecology and the environment. And we thought this was a nice way to go from thinking about connections to country and the importance of water, and then think from an Aboriginal perspective, but then also looking at how all people that have grown here and lived here, either born here or migrated to the area, often have done that because of a passion for the environment, and that they surf because they are really passionate about protecting this amazing region that we live in, but also keeping in mind at the same time there's a lot of consciousness about the environmental impacts of surfing kind of materials. We didn't end up going into a huge amount of like a section kind of looking at that, but there are bits and pieces that were dripped in throughout the show that just thought about, you know, there was an artist that might have worked with recycling plastics to make an artwork, just to kind of keep that thread just being there, because a lot of people are very passionate about and think about the impact of what they're doing too. But I'll draw your attention to the top row, where there's a whole lot of just sort of A4 images up there. Now, they're actually the digital reproductions of the front covers of a number of publications called Rave. Now, Rave magazine is something that Belinda knows a lot about now, which is, well, in terms of part of this project, which is really exciting. But I encourage you, as a result of this project, because we found that they were originally donated to, were they donated to local studies or to the collection? To the museum, as a donation through a sort of a community call-out cultural project, community curators we called it, so we had all of these publications, which were sort of from sort of like the 60s through to the late 80s, and it was a homegrown publication, essentially looking at, made by a lot of surfers, but it touches on the environment, and contemporary issues of the time. And so by actually digging in, and we had one of our community members that lives here, has written a PhD on ecology and surfing in the environment, who also happens to work for News of the Area here, Dr. Kim Satchell. So it was one of those things where by finding people's expertise and points, Kim would come into the local studies, access those magazines and start flipping through things and finding points of interest for his own research and letting us know about these stories. And then when we were having a flick through, it was fascinating to see the kind of learnings that came out of just reading things of the time. So there were so many people that were featured in the exhibition that actually you'd end up finding it's like, oh, here's so-and-so, here's so-and-so, and actually having stuff from there. And there was a really exciting discovery, which I'll mention shortly, that led to the inclusion of a really beautiful story that was literally from just seeing a name in an advertisement in that magazine. And it was like, oh, maybe we should do some digging. And it worked. So those rave magazines were critical, once again, to what actually, and you think about, a social history and art exhibition, but that kind of magazine material, the photographs, all of that stuff was kind of really the bits and pieces that helped us understand all the stories and connect all of the dots. So that was a kind of ode to a lot of talking about the environment, including, which is you can't see it there, but there is a snippet of footage, which once again, in terms of archival material, through, once again, word of mouth, someone who worked for NRTV, the Northern Rivers TV, and has accumulated a huge amount of material, which is actually on our, a lot of that material is on our Coffs collections. It's related to the Look At Me Now headland protest. And I encourage you to have a look at that in your own time. It's a really fascinating piece of history that's connected to this story, but also to this region more generally, where it is a protest against an ocean outfall that was proposed for off the Look At Me Now headland at Emerald Beach, isn't it? Yeah, Emerald Beach, thank you. Obviously you had your diehard protesters that were involved in that at the time, but this whole surf community here got heavily involved, and there's so much documentation thanks to, there was also a councillor, Alf Williams, that was involved, and Bob Weeks, the well-known photographer, he actually captured a whole lot of imagery at that time, and it ended up being successful. But there's this amazing footage of a human chain of all of these protesters that are just, and what was different from it was just people, everyday people that have never considered protesting before. They all got on board. They formed this human chain around the headland. And part of that and the call to action and stuff was actually happening in this rave magazine and stuff. It was like, oh my gosh, this is happening. You've got to get on board. So it was just the whole stories of understanding this, the community at that time was as a result of course, people still living here and talking about it. But there was just so much evidence in all this documentation that's still around. And yeah, such a cool story. So that was a really exciting thing to present in the exhibition. We should go around, I think I'm just moving this thematically, so thank you if you wouldn't mind seeing where we land to next. That's just more example of that ecology and environment section, and this beautiful art piece by one of our local artists here, Jeff McSkimming, who was a surfer, who was also an art teacher, who also became one of our volunteers that came and met with us once a week. All we did was provide these 4 gentlemen coffee, and they come in and we were ringing surfboard shapers, and this project was not possible without everybody's generosity. So it was incredibly fun. Around the corner, we've got a showcase that looks at, if you wouldn't mind clicking another slide, please. I think this might show us, that's just another view of those beautiful rave magazines.
Rave magazine has been digitised and is available on Trove now.
It's on Trove, that's what we're trying to say. So you can see all of that. So it's one of those things where it got, we discovered what a valuable piece of information and resource this is through this project. And so then we're able to say, well, hey, let's use that grant funding to actually get that digitised. So that was another really beautiful outcome from this show. And once again, just interspersed with lots of artworks. All of the artworks in the show were by local artists. So in order to get to this point, we had so many things. We did homework by going to Yamba and looking at their surfing museum. We went down to Port Macquarie and spoke to the surfing museum down there. We had a community call out. We brought people into the gallery after hours and had a presentation and said, what do you know? What do you want this exhibition to tell? And we did that through an online form. People went to the online form, put in their information. We sent it through, and then we literally started getting in cars and going and picking it up and down the coast between Angari to Crescent Head. Was kind of the remit. And it was also, of course, there was so many discussion, and it was quite, there were some discussions that came out of that community call out that was sort of like, well, why are you going into this area and why are you going to this area? Because there's a lot of politics, of course, within what stories you do and don't tell. But we tried as much as possible to kind of be transparent about the decisions that we've made, and knowing that this was about trying to tell as much as possible in the time and the space that we have, and that we want to keep those conversations going. So around the corner, please, with a new slide is, that's just more awesome. This is just stuff that came in, which will hopefully go back and acquire material as a result of this project, but just, just so much stuff that people have been collecting that tells stories. So that was some really awesome stuff we hope to add to our collection. Then if we flip through, again, this is an ode to the amazing photographer John Witzig, and also his contemporary, why am I having a mental blank of this very important gentleman? It'll come to me, apologies, my brain's so thinking about wonderful new shows. But so John Witzig has lived in this region. He's up in Maclean. He's been here for a very long time. Very, very well known for his amazing, very social history-related documentation of people not necessarily getting that perfect shot, but being there, the fly on the wall, capturing connection between people. That's a very snapshot of some of the images. He's very generously donated a lot to our collection, to Grafton Regional Gallery, so all through donation, which is incredible. And on the right-hand side, this wonderful gentleman whose name is leaving me today is actually born and bred in Coffs Harbour and is the lead photographer for Billabong. So we're home to a lot of stories. He's also an artist, as you can see there. We then around the corner had, thank you for the next slide, that's this is some of John Witzig's original material. So we borrowed this from him. That's the cover of the Tracks magazine. He founded Tracks magazine with 2 other people. That's his original camera that he went out and actually started taking photos on. It's still got the leg rope attached so it didn't fly off. So it was kind of, and there were lots of stories in there in terms of that, the different technology between John's time and I'm going to have to look up, it's killing me, sorry. But we actually had some of the contemporary camera gear as well to kind of make those comparisons. Next slide, please. This is part of a snapshot of some of moving into another thematic that looks at all of those stories that are so often not seen in the stories of surfing, to do with the amazing contributions of women. So for us, once again, similar to other marginalised groups, we wanted to have kind of a section that was an ode to stories, but then intersperse the stories throughout the show. So this was something as you entered, it was on the right-hand side, some of an area that, focused on women's stories. Incredibly, that showcase on the right-hand side features 2 trophies from a woman that's been living here since she was 3. She's now 82, I think, and she was actually the person that came 3rd in the world titles at Manly in 1964. Now, of course, because we all know who came first, and we all know, of course, who came first in the men's, but we never heard about Hilary Nicholson, her name was at the time. She's now Hilary Molitas, because she was a woman that was from Coffs Harbour. So what was really exciting is she has been known in bits and pieces, but we were really able to highlight her story by showcasing those trophies. She actually installed them herself personally, because it was a very emotional time for her to actually see that recognition, because she's kind of felt like she's very much sort of, it's not really, while she still goes out on the water every day, she even experienced you know, she was just one of the boys when she was a kid. But then she said that she found connection here as a kid. But then when she went to Sydney, it was just like she was too good. She was a lot better than the other women. So they were just like, don't want to know about you, and you're from the country. And then the men, or of course, then she was, you know, sort of ostracized from both the men's and the women's sides. And then even being back here in the sort of 70s and 80s, the Board Riders Club here, just I guess once again, the time, she wasn't even allowed to store her surfboard at the club because she was a woman. So she'd have to literally, you know, and of course we're talking about heavy balsa wood boards at this point, which is the one that's on the top right there. She would have to actually, you know, paddle home because she couldn't store it at the Board Riders Club. So it was just kind of being able to, you know, shed some light on those kind of stories, but also showcasing the brilliance and the amazing stories of the women. So that was kind of a snapshot. Now in the centre there's a rip curl board that's blue with that lovely design there. That was a really key story of someone that, you know, as I said, it was a very short time period. So in terms of doing a call out, you're going to get to people that only see Facebook or they're on our mailing list or something. Nerida Falconer is still lives here in Coffs Harbour, and that board there she took to South Africa in 1997, and that was the first time that women were allowed to compete in that particular rip curl competition. So this is 97 we're talking about. She actually had that board made by one of the incredible surfboard shapers that everyone loved, called Richie West here. Made that board specifically for that event. And so that was just a huge moment. She ended up then quitting professional surfing and spent her whole life to this day focusing on surf education. So she actually also established the first surf school in Australia that actually has the title. Now I've forgotten but she called it that actually. So in terms of an ABN, of course, there are surf schools, but there was a particular organisation of the name of the surf school that meant it was the first, which is just like another cool thing that you can add to birthing out of Coffs Harbour, which hardly anyone knew about. And I'm talking about all of the people that are in this surfing community. They barely knew about that. And her name was one of the ones that we saw on this advertisement in another women's story by Chantel, who was actually talking about how difficult it was to get sponsorship in the Rave magazine in sort of the 80s and 90s, saying, oh, it's really hard to get sponsorship. But, you know, there's this woman, Helene, and her name was spelled incorrectly, who runs surf lessons. And I remember reading it and just being like, I think I've heard that name before. Did a bit of digging, and then all of a sudden, you know, just went out into a Facebook page and said, oh, I don't know if you see this, but if you're interested, we're doing this exhibition. The next day she called and was like, oh my God, I can't believe you found me. What do you want? You know, so it was kind of one of those things where, and it was that word of mouth, that community engagement, all of the people that are represented in the rest. If you continue through some of those other slides, we've got there, so that's just another showcasing. There's a water closet. If you haven't been to the water closet here in Tormina, female-owned and run vintage surf shop. She picks all the boards. She's a surf knowledge guru. She's happy to take anyone out for a paddle. Yeah, a really wholesome business. She's she's making coffee on the side. She's got chairs. She's got books. You just can go and hang out in terms of creating, keeping that vibe going. Beth is a champion, so that's one there. That's just another celebration of Hilary Miletus. We flick through to another one. That's more of the water closet. We commissioned a photo series, so we went there on a Saturday morning, invited a whole lot of women surfers that worked with her, that spend time at the water closet, and took photos of them. The next slide, please. This on the left is just more of advertisements that were in the Rave magazines that we just made as stickers to stick on the wall, just to kind of show all the different stores that used to be around. To the next one, please. This is the 60s and 70s kind of area. So all those wonderful guys that used to come and have coffees with us every day. This is kind of like predominantly the stories from their life and their section. So we highlighted those. But there's different shapers. So everything here, anything that was on the wall had some connection to this region. whether they be photo series. Oh, there's a guy that actually, this little beautiful up here, I'm just pointing for those online to a little blue framed piece there of handcrafted boards by a gentleman that lives here that's just so passionate about surfing, and he handcrafted all of the different types of boards out of timber. That was something that we discovered when we went and visited him. He was in hospital at the time, and so we met with his wife, and people just opened up their cupboards literally and said, "What do you want?" It was just amazing. There are tools there from different generations, and then this beast on the wall, which took up a lot of time and effort but was so rewarding, was actually a surfboard from 35 different surfboard shapers that have either existed or still exist here in somewhere between Angourie and Crescent Head in alphabetical order. And that 35 was of about at least 75 surfboard shaping companies, or, do it yourself in the banana shed, like we're talking from that to, the big ones that are from this region. And we just tried to fit as many as possible. And each of them had a bio, which we spoke to the shaper about, or through word of mouth. So that was a lot of the work that this team helped us with, getting to know all these people. And of course, then every time we spoke to another surfboard shaper, they'd be like, "Have you spoken to so-and-so?" Oh my God. So we jumped in the car and it was like, "We've got, 3 weeks to go." And we still had things dropped off the day before we opened. So it was just an amazing project. When you go through the next room, that's just once again another view of all of the different types of material from different generations. That board has a story, the balsa wood. It was found in a Grafton department store. It was just, wild. We go into the next gallery. The next gallery showcased, that's just another, so I've just got so many images there to help prompt. That's a bit more of the surfboard shaping timeline. Other paraphernalia. We then had a section on, and of course that was also good for the people that loved, actually had, because when you've got people that are not experts curating a show, we actually then importantly had different talks throughout the course of the exhibition that brought those sections to life. So we had one by Kim, who was doing a tour of the ecology and his personal experience. We had one of this very important story, the Cooper's story, which that surf shop still exists today. There are 7 of them around the region. And it's a family-owned and run business who've literally, the Coopers have supported almost every surfer you can think of in this region, including profiling the prowess of our Gumbaynggirr surfers in the 60s, because Bob Cooper immigrated from California in 1957. And of course he was like, everyone was like, "Oh my God," because he's the Californian dude with the big hair, and brought all of the trends from California straight to Coffs Harbour. So we were the place. And it was one of those things where, in terms of the road trip, we talked about the road trips and the influence of people hopping off, stopping in Coffs Harbour, hanging out at Cooper's, learning to shape with Cooper, and then going up to Noosa and heading back, and people just gathering and just all that fun, and living like hippies, literally just living on brown rice and going up to Angourie, all of the stories were there. So we got the people in to tell those. We had a in conversation with John about his story. We had women's panel that talked about, different perspectives. We had another section on which I think if we flick through the last few bits and pieces, this kind of celebrates we kind of wanted to have, because it was a community show, you obviously had to acknowledge the numbers of professional surfers that have come from this region, which is kind of where you see the $50,000 check on the wall. So that's an ode to professional surfers. And then right next to it, that was just trophies of anyone that might have won a second, or a good on you for joining surfing when they were a kid. So it was kind of trying to make sure that we were covering as many stories as possible. But because there were 2 women that were curating the exhibition, you'll notice that in the centre of that $50,000 check is actually, in the heart of the professionals, is actually Nerida Falconer, this framed work, who is hiding down on this sort of near Crescent Head, isn't it? Thank you. There you go. And she came out of the woodwork thanks to Nerida Falconer, who we were talking and said, "Oh, we've got these stories set down." Nerida said, "Who else have you got?" And she said, "Have you been in touch with Nerida Falconer?" And we said, "Oh, no, everyone's been trying to get in touch with her for weeks, but no one's got a phone number." And Nerida's like, "I can call her if you want." And we're like, "Oh my gosh." So she'd actually never really spoken about surfing and her professional life with her children.
So it was very much in kind of, so it was sort of, we then talked to her about what she felt comfortable with doing. She ended up coming to the opening with her son and being like, this is the part of my life I haven't told you about, which was just like, oh my God. So that was a really beautiful outcome. Last bits and pieces before we tell me to stop talking. This is the clubs and board riders. So many, of course, you know, how do you fit them all? But Board Riders Club in Coffs Harbour started in 1957, is one of the longest running here in the country. So that's a beautiful, but there's things from Nambucca. We tried to squash as much as you can see in there, including even a bell there that was like on the Park Beach Surf Club or something, and it was used as, that was the shark bell, the one there. So people, you know, everyone, it was just like the stuff. It was just coming out of the woodwork. And of course, I think if we flick through to the next bit, this is just showcases some of the local artists, parts that are in our collection. On the top is Robert Moore, who lives up in Grafton. That's a really beautiful work that we've brought into the collection since the show, because I guess the thing about Coffs Harbour too is that, you know, people don't know it as the place with all the big waves. You know, you don't go to Coffs, you go to Noosa or you go to down in Victoria, but it's known for its kind of like 30 beaches that are all quiet, and it might take you a whole summer to catch a good wave, but it doesn't stop all these people from going out every day. And so that was just a really beautiful example of that. Robert goes and just sits on the water up at Uragia National Park and actually often paints from the board and paints those landscapes. So that was a nice one. That's a local artist. Ted Hillier on the bottom right, Adam Osti at the top. So just, yeah, all people that live here and are creative and inspired by this region. We've then got, I think next to that, the very important story on more beautiful artwork. Charlie Stevens, a Kumbangia artist, Tony Coling, who lives in the region and has donated a whole lot of works to our collection. And I think after this, this is the mass photography, which is at least 2 other walls of this, where we just tried to get as many different people to send in photographs of, you know, surf schools, women's bodyboarding clubs, professional surfers, free surfers. There's Otis Carey on the top left there, woo, on his surfboard up there. And once again, mixing all of the different ages and abilities in the same place, and trying to get as much as possible. Of course, there are so many stories that, you know, are not there. But there's a wonderful disability surfers group that's featured in one of the other walls. And then I think after this, we've got the bodyboards, because bodyboarding is a really important part of Coffs Harbour's history. And of course, you'd say to some surfers, oh, you can't have bodyboards and surfboards in the same exhibition, but we did it anyway. That was a private collection there of someone that has been collecting, bodyboards, because in the 80s, Coffs Harbour was one of the biggest places for bodyboarding. It's like, because I guess once again, if you haven't got big waves, it's perfect for bodyboarding. So that was a beautiful tribute. And there are plenty of other stories about people that have had great success. Before you go around into the corner, we had a bit of an ode to surf film, I think, after this. Now, we're in the process of we've got the rights for part of the film to enter the collection, but of course, as we are all familiar with these processes, is we want to make sure that we have the consent in writing from all of the contributors to the surf film before we put it into the collection. But this goes for about 20 minutes, and we're very lucky to be the Bath Time Productions are based here in Coffs Harbour. They're brilliant. They do stuff all over globally as well as here. Because they've chosen Coffs Harbour to be their home and they live in Sawtell, we commissioned them to do a surf film and once again harness their knowledge and expertise. So it was kind of like a combination of us doing the rabbit holing, but also getting these other people to go out and use their skill sets. And so they went and used all of their connections to get surf film footage of not only their own, but we were able to, thanks to our facilities here, if you ever need to use them, that's probably, I'm just thinking, because we obviously have our memory station, which, have we talked about that at all? No, probably because you're online. We're very lucky to have a memory station here where we digitised a whole lot of photos so that they could be presented here in the exhibition. We also digitised VHS and Super 8 footage, and that composed into this film that kind of was just, it's brilliant. So hopefully we'll get it up into our collection so it can be shared to the masses into the future. So stay tuned for that. We'll share it widely, particularly for those online. That's a really awesome way to learn more about this project and the power of, I guess, storytelling, research, spending time chatting and doing, when do we don't get the opportunity to do this type of projects very often. It was a labour of love, as you can see, but one of those things where just the ongoing, I think, in terms of key messages, I guess for us, utilising the expertise of the community and bringing them on board at the outset is key to the success of the project, because that opened up all of this extra primary and secondary source material, from whether it's oral histories to the magazines that were in boxes, to going and sitting, trawling. There's a guy called Paul Josky who we're hoping that we'll have the chance to do some oral histories with, and other people, to kind of, trawling through his family records and things and selecting photographs that told a story. So one that, was incredibly rewarding for us, but also for the community, because they hadn't had the chance to have their story told for a while. And important, and I guess, which is what we have to hold ourselves to, is that a lot of the goodwill that came from being a part of this project was also establishing those relationships, so that when we do have resources and opportunities to re-engage, we can actually bring those stories back into the walls, physically or digitally, into the future. So for us, we'd love to see, whilst it's been a 12-month period since this exhibition opened, we were honest about the fact that it wasn't going to happen tomorrow in terms of seeing this content again, that we will be working, actually we've carved out a bit of time next year, and actually scheduling that time to say, look, we need to do some changeovers and things in our museum exhibition, which for those in the room will be able to see, but scheduling time, because of course it's only really when you can actually prioritise a project like this and be like, we've got this 22nd, in fact I think it opened on the 22nd of November last year. That was kind of the way that we were able to funnel the resources to achieve that, whereas if you're trying to do something like this in the background, it's always very hard to get the buy-in, and also managing the expectations of the people that you're working with, and kind of saying, look, people will be like, oh, it's not much time, but if we actually were talking about it, doing it in 2 years' time, to keep that momentum, it would have been incredibly difficult. So I think we thought about how ideally a little bit more time for this project would have been ideal, but actually not as much as we thought, because maintaining those relationships and engagement with the community is a lot of time and effort. And to be able to actually have something discreet to be like, we're working to deliver this, are you available, yes or no, with view to then keeping contact details for those who might have stories that they're not available to tell them now, but we'd love to look at ways to do that in the future. And for us, it's going to be now finding those grant opportunities, so that we can then be like, how can we get another great, we've identified a whole lot of people that we could do a really great oral history project with. And it is actually a bit time sensitive with some of these stories, because not everyone is spring chickens anymore, that we will want to carve out time to actually have a project that has a finite time frame and a deliverable, being it goes on to our website or something like that, because I think without that, we haven't been able to touch something like this all year. So it's kind of like actually being like, this is a project that will schedule time and resource to, is how we were able to achieve this. But you just can't underestimate how valuable the conversations and the time that was spent to do that, because those phone numbers and those stories, there is the opportunity to actually find ways outside of the exhibition to present those stories into the future. And I think that's what we're really excited to embark on next. That's the presentation in a nutshell.
Thank you.
Amazing. Yeah, it was really fun.
Yeah, that was amazing.
Thank you for listening. And if you ever want to, if there's any kind of resources that could be useful for any other projects that you may or may not be doing, because we've got the contacts, it's like, please get my email through this process, because as I said, this was all a word of mouth show. Yeah. And once we've got consent from people, we would love to be able to see these stories go elsewhere, because whilst that is very, very relevant to here, it has national relevance too. Awesome. I think you get to go down and have a tour for those of you here and wrap up the online. But thank you.
Thank you. I'll see you then.
Are you getting off the tour?
Oh, no, I'm going to, there's a tour, I'm coming on the tour. Yeah.
Thanks for that. Thank you. Thank you everyone for attending today's meeting. I hope you enjoyed it.
Yep.
Please feel free to give us ideas for what you want to hear and see next year, and feel free to contact any of the speakers if you want further information. But thanks again, everyone, and thank you, Belinda, for hosting. It's fantastic. Thank you.
Thank you.